Okay, if you notice the title, and I'm really trying to change the terminology. Handling incomplete readiness flags. Flags is how OBD2 truly was set up. Flags were the things that you are using for your emissions inspection, not the monitors. Monitors are going to show you they make the flags. There might be one test, there might be multiple tests. So when someone says I can't get a monitor to run, that's very deceiving. And after today, you won't be using that term. Now, you might do like I do. I use the word monitors periodically, but you're going to get into mode 6 and you're going to find out which one of those tests is what we call the blocker. And I'm telling you, I had 4, and then a fifth, a little different on the fifth one. Case studies this week, guys contacted me about this, and they're starting to pinpoint quicker where the blockage might be. And that's what we want to show you. Little review here. We've used this chart. You guys have been with me. We've used this in the past, but we're going to focus on 2 of the modes. We're going to focus on mode 9, which is the in-use performance tracking. We did mode 9 yesterday with calibration identification, calibration verification number. Today, we're going to use in-use performance tracking. And I have a case study helping a shop down in Redwood City with a 2018 Camaro that had a bunch of issues that we used all 3 of those things to identify a software issue. So you're going to see how this today is about working smarter. Yesterday you sat on your butt all morning. Today you're going to sit on your butt all morning. But when you use this information, you're going to sit on your butt in the car, and you are going to collect a lot of information right off the bat before you ever get out of that car. You're going to have a plan for this kind of stuff before you leave the car. And remember on mode 6 is just showing you the limits and the test results for each of the monitors. Okay, that's the important thing to remember. And if you notice, when you get a chance to look through that Honda article I sent you, one of the first things I looked at is after I reprogrammed my Honda was I noticed that the CAT limit was raised from 16 to 17. Forgetting what the number is, what it was, percentage, time, whatever, it doesn't matter. It was increased. So that tells me that part of the fix was in that increase. And right away, I had a good feeling that things were going to work out, and it did. Okay, so mode 6 is something that you've got to know how to use. And when we get into CAN cars, 2008 and newer, there's a chart you're going to see later, and you've seen it before. I think you used it in the last class. It's standard now. I automatically say to you, did you check mid 01, 02, 05, 06 when you couldn't get the O2 to run or the CAT to run? I have you check those right away. And they all mean the same thing on every car. That's the beauty of it. Okay. Now, we're gonna focus tonight or today on the non-continuous monitors that are flags that we use for smog purposes. And it says they can only flip to complete once per trip. So whether you're looking at it the old way where it was incomplete and it flips to complete, it can only do that once per trip. We'll show you on CAN cars, there's also a second mode that if it's already complete, it'll show you what it does this trip, but it can only flip to complete once per trip. What I want you to see on the bottom though, and this is very, very important, 2 of the case studies that I helped people with this week, they learned a lesson on this, and we're going to explain this as we go through this. While a non-continuous monitor can only flip to complete once per trip, it is possible for the PCM to run the monitor or monitors multiple times during the same trip to determine a result. Basically, what it's saying is we want to run this long enough to determine if it can fail. And that's really going to be the key to what we're going to look at one of these items we're going to look at in mode 9. So I had 2 this week where they reflashed the car, no parts were changed, and after it ran the first time, the mode 9 I'm going to show you actually said complete, but the flag hadn't flipped. Then they drove it again and again, and not only did the mode 9 increase, but the flag finally flipped to complete. So I'll explain that as we go through it. So I want you to get that out of your mind that they only run the test. They might run the test 2 or 3 times in the same key cycle. They might run it more. They might take samples. They might take flow counts. And right now, think of this as a pyramid. We're at the bottom of the pyramid. We're going to get here by the end of the day, and you're going to feel real good about what you're learning today. It's a great Sunday class. Okay, this is the engineering data that every manufacturer has to submit to the Air Resources Board. Unfortunately, and as usual, it's GM who makes this available to you. And I haven't sent those 2 links out to you. I'm going to send you out the GM and the Ford links. I've seen the Ford one for this. I have the Audi one for this. So whenever I have someone calls me, I go right in here, it's a GM, I go to the engine family, I go to the code, and I get the information like in this area right here to say, this is how I might want to drive it. Now, sometimes it's more information than we need and it's stuff we don't quite understand. So you learn to pick out the important stuff. And you'll learn how to filter out things that just aren't going to be important to you, like response delay timer, it says there, 1.5. I'm not going to do anything with that. I am concerned that there aren't any other DTCs. Okay. Engine runtime, coolant temp, all that stuff is there. And the most important thing, what I'm looking for, and we're going to see today, is this one over here in the red called once per trip. You notice that's a P0133 code over here on the left, and it's a once per trip. Whenever you see a once per trip, that is going to be the monitor test that flips the flag to complete. Keep that in mind. Once per trip ones are the ones that are going to flip it. So if you tell me that the O2 sensor monitor is not completing, flag is not completing, I'm going to go in there and I can tell you, I can almost go right to the mid and the test and tell you that's the once per trip that's not been run yet. And we're going to see this when we see that the cat has run. We're going to talk about this on Tuesday night, where the cat runs first. That means the O2 test that it would need it fast passed enough to be able to test the cat. But this particular test hasn't run yet, and it's used to finish off the O2 monitor. And again, I'll have examples for you as we go through this. Okay, now there's another page here that says, this is another vehicle in a GM. The link on the bottom is the one I'm going to send you. It's free. If you do GMs, you don't want to be without this page, without this link. Catalytic converter, P0430, oxygen storage. But look what it says here. One test attempted per, let me zoom that in a little bit, because again, I don't know what screens you're on. One test attempted per valid idle period. Minimum of one test per trip to a maximum of 6 tests per trip. And notice what it says, maximum of 6 checks to detect a failure. I want you to remember this. Tests and completions, the definition simply is, did the monitor test run long enough to determine if the system could fail? That's really what it is. That's what it wants to see. Okay, so you can see in 2 examples here, we had a once per trip test here. You meet this criteria, it flips. We get over here and you have a monitor test that could run multiple times, and it could be for other monitors other than the cat. It could be for EVAP, where they're running the test multiple times to determine that there really is a leak. In other words, what they don't want is they don't want false passes, but they don't want false fails. So keep that in mind as we go through that. Okay, just a reminder here, readiness flags are what we use for emissions. Where we got into the word monitors, and I'll be honest with you, I taught you the same stuff, but let's separate the two now. From this day forward, flags are what we use for inspections, monitors are what we use to make DTCs. So I've done this in non-emission states, and I'll get, well, we're not an emission state. I don't care. Every DTC out there, guys, is a monitor. Certain monitors make up emission flags, okay? So that's testing being done on the system. So a readiness flag simply says, I got to use it for emission reasons. I got to have so many complete to pass the smog, but they're not the test. They're the result. Now, remember, incomplete, not done, ready means since the last time you cleared the memory, the test hasn't run. Now, if you go to pre-CAN cars, which in theory is 2007 and older, but we know there's CAN in 5, 6, and 7, but let's just use that as a breakpoint. Incomplete, done, ready could have switched when it passed, but if it failed, it may have stayed incomplete. So here you are driving it, you think nothing's happening, and it's incomplete, and you got a pending code. Then you run it a second time, and it's still incomplete, but you got a DTC. The way they fix that is, if you're on a CAN car, what you need to know is complete, done, and ready simply means the system is done testing. Done testing. Okay? The result is you don't have a pending DTC, you don't have a DTC with a mill on, you're done testing. It could be on the first trip, it could be on the second trip, but the testing is done. Okay? So keep that in mind. It's important to don't get the fuzzy feeling that because it's complete, done, ready, it's not, there's not an issue. If there's no mill, Obviously, the light's not on. The vehicle, in theory, passed, but how much it passes, what mode 6 is going to show you if you're in question about how good results were. Okay, now I like to show this one. It's one I picked up out of this HP tuner. It allowed me to see this, and GM is real good about letting you see all the DTCs in the car. But what I want to show you on this one is simply, whenever I have an O2 monitor, excuse the term, flag that will not set, I go to these two monitor tests if it's a V-type engine. P0133 and 153 refer to bank 1, sensor 1, bank 2, sensor 1. If those two tests don't complete, then those monitor tests don't finish testing, the flag will not flip for the O2. But you might say, well, geez, I've seen cats run, the O2 wasn't completed. Well, let's take a look at that. Here's the rear one. Okay, anytime you see these P series codes, and this can vary a little bit, but whenever I see slow response, this is my secondary O2 that is becoming into more and more play nowadays. You've got to get into mode 6. You got to get into mode 9 if they have it for the secondary O2, and see how frequently it's running and see what the results are. So these tests right here refer to the O2 monitor, which includes the primary upfront O2 or air fuel sensor and the secondary O2. Now notice the terminology on all of them. Slow response, everything is slow response. These are the tests that we need to flip the flag for the O2 monitor. These other tests, let me get out of that. These other tests are tests that I added this in this week. You will also see on a lot of your later model cars, in a case study we're going to do later, a lot of them now are using what they call delayed response on the rear O2. In other words, you need to do a D-cell fuel cut for it to be able to run this test. And I'll explain this as we go through. Remember, at the bottom of the pyramid, we're working our way up. But look at all these tests that make up the O2 sensor. Okay? Every one of those can set a DTC, a different DTC. Okay? Not each one, different groups of DTCs, but the red ones are the ones we need to flip the front O2, and the green one, as I'll show you in a case study later, is needed to finish off the monitor through the rear O2. So we didn't pay a lot of attention to rear O2 because we couldn't get results on it in the past. Now you're going to pay attention to it, and I promise you by the end of this lesson, you're going to see how valuable it is. So look at all these O2s. When you tell me a monitor didn't run, these are all monitor tests, guys. Any one of these, if their number has changed in mode 6, they ran. You tell me the flag didn't flip, it's because the ones in the red and the green, or possibly the purple, depending on the vehicle it is, did not flip the flag because they didn't run. They didn't finish testing. Okay? We clear on that? Does that make sense? And again, please, if there's any questions today, don't hold back. This is the day you want to be asking if something's not clear. And remember, I try to put text into your handouts when you get to looking at those. So it's not everything I'm saying here, but I'm trying to add to it because I can't put all that into text. Okay, we'll refer back to that. Now, if you work with Ford and you work with IDS.
I got a question there.
Yeah,
Rick.
Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, morning. Yeah, and this PDF you're using, do we already have this one for today?
Yep. You have it. All three of them were there. They're all ready to download.
Okay, those are the one, I think I downloaded 3 of them the first day. They were like, this is the second we're using.
Yeah, this is the second you're using.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And again, you're getting the latest one that I've updated, and I've done a few more updates before this class. So you're getting the latest one. We're always learning. Okay, so here we go to Ford, and Ford has done mode 6 on their own scan tool beautifully since 1996. But let's take a look at this. Notice they say right here on the left, they say HO2S sensor, bank 1, sensor 1, monitor. They happen to put the heater current underneath that because a lot of times on Ford, you'll notice that one runs and then the other runs. They're very close to being timed together, but the O2 monitor itself, not the heater, but notice what it does right here. There's that rich to lean response time. So this is PO, I forgot what vehicle this is off. This would be the PO133. And if it's working with the other bank, it'd be PO, as we are down here. It would be working with the other bank, that'd be your PO153. So you get your test ID, you get your mid, which is your test. So if you go into mode 6 and see 01, you know that's bank 1, sensor 1. If you see 02, you know it's bank 2, sensor 1. That's the way it works. These tests right here are all up to the individual manufacturer and how they number them. But these are the words I'm looking for if I'm going to look up information. These are going to be my blockers for the O2 flag. And you get your test results here. They're great. They're in time, seconds, very clearly laid out. Now, if we come down here, we go down a little bit farther. Notice these are requiring multiple tests. Now, this was lean to rich response time. Look at the rear O2, because I want you to remember this, because we're going to look at this later. Look at this right here. This is becoming more and more. If you're working on Chryslers, you're working on some GMs now, you're working on some Fords, you're working on some Nissans. I'm just going to cut a few off the top of my head. Fuel cut shut off, decel fuel cut is what we're trying to do to test the rear O2. And so there's that one that matched up to the previous slide that showed you the monitors. And I said, look for a delayed response. This is the one. So that means, let me see if there's, I think everybody's in. Let me someone wants in. Hold on. There you go. I missed that. Okay. If you look here, there's multiple tests to flip that flag. Now let's go down to the catalyst here. If you take a look at the catalyst, there's only one test. It's called rear to front switch ratio. So the switch into the front, the switch into the rear. There's only one. Go ahead.
On that fuel shut off rich to lean response, that's just simply just deceleration?
Yep. Okay. And you're going to see, and I got a case study in the end where you're going to see how that works. There's two different types of decel fuel deceleration. With the air fuel sensors, I'm going to show you Tuesday night, it means doing this. Not real hard decel fuel cuts. Drive it rich, drive it lean, drive it rich, drive it lean. So you're going rich, decel cut, rich, decel cut. Where a lot of your other vehicles, you got to throttle it. You got to just let off the throttle and let it rip in a decel fuel cut. So two different types, but yes. Okay. Now, if you notice, there's only one for that. So it'll look mid 2-1 is always bank 1 sensor, cat 1. And then on the EGR, we know there's multiple tests on the EGR. Let me shrink that a little bit. There's multiple tests on the EGR, but there's only one to flip the flag. So remember, we're using these to flip the emissions flag, the readiness flag, but that's not all the testing that's being done on the O2s. You're starting to see how we're separating this out. Flags are one thing, monitors make flags, but certain monitor tests won't flip the flag until they run, okay? So this is how we want to be using this the rest of the day and the rest of the class, even into Tuesday night. Does this make sense? Does this kind of clear some things up? It will as we get into more of the specific information. Okay, here's a chart that I recreated from years ago, and I love this. I really hope that when you leave this class, this is where you start when you're trying to handle incomplete readiness flags. And remember, we're talking typically the one, not the whole group of them. We're talking the one that's going to drive you crazy and it's going to cost you time and money. That's really what it's doing. So if you look at box number 1, and we're going to go through these individually. If you look at box number 1, it says verify readiness status. That's the first thing you should be doing. You can call it pre-scanning or whatever you want, but you're going to verify the readiness status up front. And you're looking to see what's incomplete. Okay. If you are on a 2008 or newer car, and I'm going to clarify this, remember CAN phased in 5, 6, and 7. You may find this mode 9 in-use performance tracking in some of those vehicles. They phased in some of it, but not all of it. Example being my 2007 Honda is not a CAN car, but it's got great in-use performance tracking information. And that's why I created that article that you can read. If you haven't read, they get a chance to read that I emailed you. So you can see how you use these together. It lets you see the frequency, how often the flag tests are running. So either way, we go here first. Then we if there's anything incomplete, we perform a drive cycle, or I like Toyota used to call verification repair. If one or more readiness flags remain incomplete, what is the next step? Well, is the mill on? If there is, yes, check for DTC. If a DTC is present, check your mode 6 data to identify the monitor test. Which test failed in the series of tests? So you can pinpoint on that. Then follow any TSB/trouble tree to isolate the cause of the problem. If the mill is off, and this is where I get frustrated sometimes, I get people that'll drive and drive and drive, and they forget to go back and check periodically for pending codes. Because remember, 2-trip codes don't turn on the lights. So you're driving the car, and you're wondering why it's not running. And finally, you go look at mode 7, and you find a pending code. It probably ran 10 minutes ago. So if you don't think it's completing and you're driving, flip over to pending DTCs to see if the test actually had completed that key cycle. If there is a pending DTC, check mode 6 data to identify the monitor test that failed. Retest the vehicle to complete, because remember, pending DTC is not a complete test. It says it could fail, but it hasn't failed. And BAR is collecting pending DTCs for their own data bank. You have to finish testing to get that flag to complete, or you have to finish it to get it to fail, pass or fail, either way. Okay, if none are present, check for changes in mode 6 test results. If there are changes, then those tests have run. If there are no changes, verify the enable criteria and retest the vehicle. Okay, the last one, if the mill is off and no pending DTC, but mode 6 is changed, retest the vehicle because multiple trips might be required before it will render a decision. Okay, so I'm giving you multiple assignments this week, and then at the end of that, we render a decision on your grade. Simple. ASC says you get 1 test, 1 grade. That's it. Well, when we're dealing with a CAT, we're dealing with EVAP, we might be dealing with EGR flow. We want it to be sure that when we say it's failed, it's truly failed. When it's passed the best we can tell. So they might take multiple tests, and we're going to show you this and show you how to average it out, how they average it out to come up with an answer. Okay, so that's the whole chart that I would hope that maybe you'd even take out, print this page, stick it on the side of the machine like some of you used to take the old sun scope pattern that they had for years and put that on the side of the machine so you know what each line means. Put this on the side of this somewhere so you know, follow this chart. I guarantee you this chart works. Okay, so let's start breaking this down. Let's go to box number 1 up here. Verify the status. If any or all flags are incomplete, then check. So let's walk through this. Okay, I've got a situation here. I need some help, guys. Tell me what you're looking for here. What do you think? Why? Why do we have everything not supported?
Software's been tampered with.
Absolutely. That's the first place you're going.
You have the same situation I am in.
What's that now?
You have the same situation there in a vehicle I am in. I'm working on a vehicle with us, the same result.
They all say not supported under the current status of the readiness?
Yep, all of them.
Okay, somebody may have gone in, and let me show you how that works. So everybody that's listening got good understanding. Not supported should not be. And remember we said yesterday, BAR's collecting this now. BAR is collecting all this information. They see this, if this vehicle is in for a smog, it would get stopped right on the spot because this is a tampered vehicle. So let's take a look at it. Remember yesterday I showed you that little HP tuner? The way it works is when you have the software and you have the tuner, you can go in, and if you notice, I can go in and look at these individual tests, and it doesn't have EGR, so it was already disabled. It was disabled by the manufacturer because EGR is not on the car, it's got VVT. Notice the O2 test, enabled, O2 heater, enabled, and a CAT, enabled. Well, look at what happens when somebody plays with it. That's what we call flipping the bits. They went in and look at what they did to the O2, the CAT, and the O2 heater. They disabled them all. So that means they're not supported. So that's how we get to that point. Now, that was available to anybody who bought these tuners. One of the guys, I forgot which tuner he was using when I was in New York. We were talking about this, but when I went on and hosted a workshop remotely for them, he was in the class again, and he told me that supposedly that manufacturer, the software he was using, won't allow you to do this now, but we'll see. So that's how you get there, Joel. That's probably what you got. And what kind of vehicle is that, Joel?
Well, I have gone so far, like at the point, like I give up already on that car for now. It's a 2003 Chevy GMC Sierra diesel.
Okay, so oh yeah, okay. Well, there's your other tampers too. Okay, so I'm going to give you, when we get, you remember we talked about CVNs yesterday
Mm-hmm.
and that GM website?
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to take that link when I give it to you later, put in the VIN for that car. You should be able to go look up the calibration number, then mode 9, you go into mode 9 and you look at the cal ID, you look at the CVN and go to that website. And I'll show you this in the case study later, how you're going to do this. And you should be able to see if the numbers match up.
Yeah,
Okay?
I have gone way far on that vehicle, like PCM calibration, replacing a new PCM from the dealer and install the software, and still I got no.
Oh, okay. So you've already gone those steps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, are you doing it? You did a PCM replacement or reprogram and replace?
We did the first one, we did just reprogramming.
Okay.
And it still was the same. So I told this guy, I'm thinking this thing got a tuner. So I don't know if it damaged anything on the computer. So I would like to get a computer. And we got a brand new computer from the dealer, installed it and programming. And still I am in the same situation there.
Now, let me ask you, have you looked around that vehicle? He doesn't have another control box somewhere?
That's what I have been doing, because we pretty much disassembled the whole dash to find out, and we didn't find anything. And the only place I'm thinking about if they have installed something under the seat or something like that. But that's the only place I haven't checked on this vehicle.
Well, let me say this, Joel. By the end of the day, with what we talked about yesterday and the Camaro we're going to use in the case study later, you should be able to go in and verify all the software packages, even in the current computer, and see if they match up. That's all you can. That's where you're going to have to start. Just make sure that everything is loaded in properly. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, then.
Okay. So, guys, this does happen. It's real. Bar's putting it out now. Bar's acknowledging it. But I want to show you how this happens. This is nothing you did unless you're the tuner. But when you get a vehicle like this, that's a red flag right there. And you just heard Joel. Perfect example, especially with diesels. People like to do those a lot. But this is what it would look like in the PCM's brain. And one of the things I like about this, I'm going to say this to you. I've done a number of CAN vehicles with this. This is best for CAN. It has other information, and I can look at fuel trim tables. I can look at a lot of things that I just want data from. And it's really cool. To me, the software, and if you want to play with this, you have some time, some of you like the putts, go to hptuner.com and you can download 2 different software packages for free and play with the files they have and see what they have in there. And if you said, I want to buy a scan tool that will let me see some of that data, this cost me $299 to have it, to go look inside and see other tables that we can't see on the particular, allow you to see the vehicle you're connected to. Only on CAN cars, but it's kind of cool. Okay. So we're cool. We got not supported monitors. Somebody went in through their software and flipped the bits, and that's what you're dealing with. Hey,
Right.
That's a tampered vehicle. Go ahead.
On those non-supported monitors, like I've seen cars like have at least like one monitor, either complete or not complete, and it would actually probably just say complete, but it would pass the smog test. Is that?
But did it say not supported?
Most of them would say not supported, but then 1 or 2 would say complete, and then we just go ahead and test it, and then it would pass.
Yeah, well, that's what your job would be. I mean, I wouldn't go any further than that either. Not sure what happened. I do remember, depending on the version of the scan tool you have and how old software is, having miscommunications where I've got stuff where I go in and look at the current status of the monitors and it says they're not supported.
Okay.
Like, that can't be. I mean, I'll show you that, I think, on Tuesday night when we go in and look at that, where remember on CAN cars, there's going to be 2 things you can look at. The thing you've looked at in readiness flags forever since 1996 was the status of the readiness flags.
Right.
That said complete or incomplete. Once it switched to complete, it never went back unless you cleared it. On CAN cars, there's a section option that says this key cycle. And that key cycle will say not complete when you turn the key on, even if it was complete, because you're watching what's happening during that drive test. I have seen scan tools when I go in there, and Autel was one of them, and I've seen a couple snap-ons on cars where when I go into that second test to look at this key cycle, it says not supported. That's a software issue. So without knowing the specific case, beware of that. But the bottom line is it passed here and it got a certificate. So for whatever reason, I wish I had an answer for the full answer for that, but know which one of the two tests you're in, and I'll defer to that Tuesday night.
I think.
Okay.
Can I
Yeah,
throw
go
in-
ahead. Good question. Go ahead.
Mode 1, I've had, does the scan tool know what the car is equipped with? Does the car report the scan tool, hey, this is what I'm equipped with?
No.
Okay, for example.
Yeah, no, what it is I don't have that chart here. I have it out Tuesday night. Mode 1 is mode 1 is not only your readiness test, but it's your PIDs, all your PIDs together. They're in one box together, all in one box together. And if they're turned off for not supported, like AC, heated catalyst, there will be a number in there that refers to that as being off. But each car that has those monitors will be assigned a decimal number in there to say that that is on this vehicle.
Okay. What I see a lot of the times is, like, say I got a car that doesn't have secondary air, but it'll list it secondary air and it says not supported.
Right. Now that's okay.
Yeah.
If you see it on
Maybe
secondary
that's where
air,
Al was going. Yeah.
secondary air, heated catalyst,
Right.
those would be the two that you're probably going to run into where you don't see anything. Remember also, for all of you, EGR/VVT is the same thing. You don't have EGR, you're going to have VVT. And you have VVT, you may or may not, and some cars do have EGR with them. So I'll have people say, well, it doesn't have an EGR monitor. Yeah, it has VVT, and we're going to talk about that Tuesday night. So here's the thing I want to say about the readiness and the PIDs, I should say. They're in one box together. This is what fries me on scan tools. I don't know if anybody out there has TechStream, but if you deal with TechStream, they did it right. What Toyota did was said, hey, we're drawing from one box. So if you want to draw your TPS, your airflow, your RPM, and you want to look at the catalyst status at the same time, go right ahead. We're in the same box. Unfortunately, Snap-on, Launch, Autel, you name it, they kept the readiness as a separate item and didn't integrate it with the PIDs. So that what I like to do is, and I'll show you how we do this on Tuesday night, we set up graphs, and I do this later today, where I put certain PIDs up, but I can't look at the monitor to see when it flipped, to know exactly what conditions it took. So I have to guess at it and draw a conclusion when it ran based on what I'm seeing. And I'm going to show you that, how we do that with the scan tool, with this graphing the scan tool data without looking at a lot of PIDs. So yeah, if I could sit down with the scan tool manufacturer, it says, please make the readiness an option when you're using PIDs. So I can put catalyst and I can put this criteria below it. And when I reach that criteria, I can see it flip. And I think I have one in Tuesday night of a Toyota we captured, so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But that's nothing we can change right now. We don't have that available to us unless I'm running a TechStream. Okay, remember on CBN, this number here is an algorithm at every key on cycle. This is the engine computer. This is the transmission computer. Whatever the software version is, this number is an algorithm to come up with that number for that software package. If somebody modified it, that number is going to change. And I mentioned yesterday, sometimes a referee tells me they see question marks. I've heard stories that on some Fords, it wipes them out. You don't get anything. And that's why they're asking for the key on a couple times on Ford, especially on a lot of the diesels. So this is the verification that BAR is using to know that the software package is authenticated to the part number. Okay. And we're going to pull this together in a case study on the Camaro later. And I showed you this yesterday. I threw this in here. This is what I would go back, Joel, and I would use this on that GM, and I would go back and look at every software package in there. Here's all the Cal IDs for each of the software packages in there. And then I would look up the calibration verification number for each of those and see what's in the car and what does the GM website have. And if I get a chance, I'll show this to you, or we can do this individually. I can actually go into the GM on this page right here and type in the computer part number, and it will tell me what the CBN should be. And we're going to do that on the Camaro later, even though I don't use this page. That's how I got there. So I type in computer number, where was it? 12612739, and it will show me the CBN that goes to that part number. And that's how you can quickly verify on GMs if you have a tampered vehicle. Unfortunately, the other manufacturers just weren't so giving on this, and that would be a tremendous tool to have, but I don't see them coming with that. Okay, so you got to remember, a PCM is broken up into 1 or 2 packages, or it could be stored in a number of locations in different software packages, so that sometimes we only reprogram this one. That's why sometimes when you reflash, it goes quick, and other times you're loading everything. It's got to load everything into the computer. Okay. And again, we talked about this a little yesterday. And again, I'm not trying to dump GM in your. If you're thinking that I'm dumping GM in you, then you're missing everything. What I'm trying to show you is a process of what every manufacturer is doing. GM is the only one that's shown you how to do this. I've helped Chrysler techs in the beginning when they were getting cars back to them because of modified software. Back then it was data check. And they went to the referee, and the referee said, well, your software doesn't match up. And then they'd automatically go back to the dealer thinking they get a warranty. Well, it was a tampered vehicle. And I had techs calling me saying, hey, they're here for this software, but the right part number's in the car. That's all the tech could tell me. I said, well, here's the issue. You have a CVN, and it looks like the CVN, somebody's tampered with the software. In 2 of the cases, the cars never came back to the dealer. So you can imagine what it was. Somebody had tampered with the software, just like they didn't go back to the referee. Okay. Okay, how about this one? What do you think when you see this? Where's your head go if you're checking a car and you see this?
Codes have been cleared, or
Okay, number 1, codes have been cleared. What else?
battery replacement.
Battery replacement. Keep going. You're on the right track.
So criteria has not been met to run the monitors.
Okay, so you've run it and nothing's happened. That's a very good possibility. How about if it was reprogrammed? Just reprogrammed. Could that do it?
Yeah.
I mean, legally reprogrammed. And then the last one that no one ever thinks about is, everybody remember keep alive memory?
Oh yeah, keep alive.
Don't forget, you've driven the car, you see them flip to complete, you turn the car off, you turn the key back on, and they say not complete. Remember, there's a fuse or fusible link to keep that part of the computer brain alive, that if you've lost that, that's going to flip this back to not complete every time. So perfect. That's exactly what we want to look for. Now, let's move on to this one. What about this one? What's your approach on this one? You only got one. And you may be an excellent monitor runner. Forget the evap one. You may be an excellent monitor runner, and you get awfully cocky on this, and you say, no problem. I'll take your money and I'll knock this out.
I think you're talking about Chrysler.
One of them. This particular one happened to be a Nissan. But yeah, this is very common now. This is probably the number 1 call or text that I get from students. Text is, it's the O2 sensor that's not complete.
Use your chart.
Use the chart and use what we're doing today. I promise you that if you follow what we're doing today, it will lead to this, solving this issue. And the most recent one was 2 days ago, and he worked on this and he worked on it. And finally, I got a message saying, we got it. So follow this plan, and I guarantee you it will work. But what I'm trying to say to you here is, this is a red flag, guys. It could be a simple red flag. It could be a money costing red flag. It could cost you time and money, because you're going to have trouble getting it. And we're going to show you how to approach this. So you see the 3 different scenarios of monitors that you want to look at. Of all of them, this is the most common one, is the O2 sensor nowadays is more of a blocker when it comes. Remember now, flipping the flag, but I also want you to look up here. What's already complete? What's on the top line? Complete.
Got a question on that one?
What's that, Joel?
Got a question on those? I have had a really hard time with most of the manufacturers for O2 sensors about Chrysler, and I have followed, closely every little detail they have there, but there must be something is not reading there, because I had a couple months ago a vehicle, like it was more than a month on the shop, and we couldn't make it run the monitor.
What year?
2003, I think it was Dodge Ram. Oh no,
year?
that one was that one was a Ram Bang, like 2003.
Okay. And that was what you're having trouble with.
Oh, well, I have had most of the issues I have with heater auto sensor. Some of them I have been able even to run it, have been Chrysler, pretty much, the
Oh
hardest.
no, I'm 2 of the ones I dealt with this week were Chryslers. First of all, with Chryslers, and I'm sure you're doing this, first thing you want to do is check the reflash. Remember the chart? There's a thing in check TSBs and follow trouble trees. A lot of reflashes for rear O2s on Chrysler. Matter of fact, we have a case study in here on a Jeep. So hang on to that one for now, Joel. Okay, so you see where we're heading. So now we've got our data to start with. Whether you're doing this for smog or you're sitting in the driver's seat trying to figure out what's going on in this vehicle, those are the three scenarios you're going to see. Okay, so let's move on. So now we're going to move to this other box. This is the box that I touched on in the last class. Some of you were there that I told you. I gave you some good information, but well, I wasn't happy with what I gave you. That's why we're doing what we're doing now. Because when you see this now, if you have that binder from 2 years ago or materials from 2 years ago, and you look at this, you say, holy crap, what he did then and what he did now is like night and day. This is the one you want. This is dead on. So in-use performance tracking is what we want to look at. And I'll explain what that is here. But let's go and see if anybody's even looked at this before. Right now, this is a bunch of gibberish to you. Believe it or not, when we get done at the end of the day, even for our young man that's in this group who's not a smog tech, I guarantee you if he's checking his own car, he's going to be able to use this. So I go in here and I look on the left and I see the ECU, that's the engine computer on this car. I'm going to explain what monitoring conditions are. You already know what monitoring conditions are if you remember the drive cycle, universal drive cycle yesterday. I want you to keep that in mind. If you remember that, you'll know what the monitoring conditions are. This car has had 11,112 startups. It's completed the CAT monitor test, and I want to emphasize this, has completed 23 out of 25. If someone told you could bet on a game or play the lotto tonight and have a 23 chance out of 25, would you play?
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah. That's the way I want you to feel about the monitor. If you look down and lower on that page, for the O2, it says you've had 4,061 out of a possible, I'm just going to throw this out right now, 26. Are you playing? Are you playing with big money? Heck yeah, because what are your chances? Divide the bottom number into the top number. What are your chances of winning? Come on.
There are still chances, but it's less.
Oh, no. Actually, when you divide the bottom, that goes in 1 point something times. That's telling you got better than a 1%, 100% chance of winning. So just I always like talk money because that gets people going. That's always a thing that gets people going. Now let's go to the other side. This vehicle is not as old, 21 monitoring conditions, 158 starts. But look at the ratio. Just look at this right now. Bottom number into the top number goes over 2 times. So that cat should be easy to run. This is all I'm going to say to you right now. I'm going to explain this more. These O2s should be easy to run. EGR, a little bit different. It's 9 out of 21. It might be VVT. Might be a little harder. EVAP, 4 out of 6. I'm going to explain all this as we go. You're going to know what these numbers mean. But this is where when you contact me and you've gone through the monitor box that we just showed you, and you move into the mode 9, this is where I want you looking. If you're going to contact me with an issue, I want captures of this information. You will see your problem there many times.
Where it says 0 on the secondary error, does it have secondary error?
When you see zeros like that, 99.9% chance it's not even on the car. Like you'll see that for secondary. Look over here on the other side, Ken. See if it's bank 2 catalyst, 0.
Gotcha.
It's too bad that they don't take it out, but since they're all there, but remember we turned the bits off. They just turn the bits off for that, so they just leave them at 0. And when we get done with this, you'll see how that can't be possible. Okay, so we don't know a lot about it yet, so stay with me. We're just walking through this chart right now. We're going to come back to mode 9. Now let's go down the chart again. If the mill is on, if a DTC, if yes, check for DTC. Look at mode. Check which monitor test failed in mode 6, and then follow your plan. So here's the vehicle. Catalyst test is complete. We've got what? We've got a failure on the left side. This is the Honda that I sent you in the letter yesterday. If you haven't had a chance to read it yet, take a look at it later. This particular car, when it failed, now the failed means it completed testing, because remember up here, this word right here says test complete. It doesn't say pass or fail. It says test complete because it's a CAN car. The test result with the light on and the code tells me it did fail. It's a current code, and it failed with a value of 17 with a maximum of 16. So this is the plan that you got to be doing. You don't have to be a wizard with mode 6, but you got to have an understanding of it and say, we don't care what that percentage means. We just know we're just a little bit over the limit. Okay, so let's move on. Now we go back. What if we only have a pending code? We do the exact same thing. Now here's the vehicle that we just tested before it finished testing. I went to DTC first. Maybe I could have gone to pending first, but I went to DTC first. So notice, not complete. Not complete. This is the first trip. And notice what we have here. We have a pending code during last drive cycle. And look at when it failed this time as a pending code. It failed with 19 over 16. But it's not complete because it needs to run one more test on the next trip for 2 trip tests to flip the flag to complete to say we're done testing. I'm going to jump back a second. Bear with me. Here's my test result from when we're done testing. Okay. This led up to it. So I'm going to emphasize to you, when you think a monitor's not running, excuse the term again, the flag's not flipping, go into pending codes. Don't wait a long time to do it. Sometimes people get 15, 20, 25 minutes down the road and they're frustrated. And then they finally go look at a pending code. It probably ran 15 minutes ago. You were done 15 minutes ago. It's not going to give you any indication. There's no flag. There's no mill. If you're not in pending codes, it doesn't come up across your scanner and say a pending code just popped up. What a great idea that would be. Okay. So this is following my chart so far. Okay. Now mode 6. You're going to use this on a quiz question later. I'm going to zoom in on this because, again, I don't know what screens you're looking at. You're on. Maybe this will help. Okay, MIDs are monitor IDs. Now we're talking CAN cars, guys. True CAN cars. Again, I refer back to my 07 that I just showed you. It's a non-CAN car, so it gave me different numbers for the cat. I know when I go to my Honda, MID TID 62 is my cat. But that can be 01 on a Toyota. It can be 10 on a Ford. That was the problem with pre-CAN. This is take it to the bank on every CAN car. This is the chart you want to use. And 99% of the time, you're going to use 01, which is bank 1, sensor 1, bank 1, sensor 2. That's the front one. Then you're going to use 05, 06 for bank 2, sensor 1, and bank 2, sensor 2. Those are the 4 that if you're going to call me or you're going to send me pictures, if it's a V-type engine and it's got 4, those are the captures I want to see, because if those aren't populated, those are your blockers right there. Okay, and you can see how they built in all the other sensors. They have to prepare for all possibilities. If we go a little farther, look at this. I told you my Honda was 62. Well, every CAN car, bank 1 is 21, 22, 23, 24. I don't need definitions for that. I know if I see a 21, it's a cat. My EGR monitor, 31, 32, 33, 34. And if it has VVT, 35, 36, 37, 38. EVAPs, 39, 3A. Remember, this is hexadecimal, so it's not following in 40, 41, that type of thing. These are all my EVAP tests. Now, if I go a little farther down on the page, I've got it zoomed, but I'll just look at the top ones. 4.1, 4.2, the heaters for bank 1, sensor 1, bank 1, sensor 2. Okay. When I go to 4.5 and 4.6, I'm looking at bank 2, sensor 1, and bank 2, sensor 2. That's going to cover most of your needs. Okay, guys, this is another chart that I would, hey, I'll say to Ken. Ken said, Julie said it was too much to print out all the pages. I would print out my flow chart and I would print out these 2 pages so you knew right away. Because remember, your aftermarket scan tools don't always give you the name, they give you the number. So if you have this chart, you'll know exactly what you're looking at. And I don't care what car you're working on, gasoline or diesel, this applies. Okay. So we can say that something actually standardized and it works. Okay. So let's look at the next page. So here's the rest of that. Here's the rest of that O2 heater. If this should just take some of the mystery out of mode 6 for you right here, because now you can believe it. It's standardized. And one thing I want to emphasize you, and I know I taught you this in other classes, when you got a CAN car, every PCM has to report to every PCM has to report to the scan tool the exact same way using the exact same tables. So Ford, GM, Toyota, Mercedes, they have to report mode 6 the exact same way. So all this scan tool has to have in it is 256 tables that apply to what they need, and they all drop into those boxes. In the past, the scan tool manufacturers couldn't make a scan tool big enough to cover all the different names and numbers and results. So if you reprogram a CAN car, they have to report the results the same way, even if the numbers change. That's the beauty of it. Okay, if you notice, no heated cat. Secondary air, they're the 7172. Fuel system monitor, we're going to talk about on Tuesday night. This is one was mentioned yesterday. I think Joel mentioned it about the fuel system monitor not flipping. We're going to show you what's in this monitor right here, so that if you are trying to run it, especially on a diesel, what you're going to have to take a look at. Then you got well, not only NOx for cat, but eventually we're going to have this for gasoline cars too. And then look at your misfire down here. When you go into mode 6, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, A8 pertain to the 7 cylinders, and A9 is cylinder number 8. All of these are standardized, guys. How often can we say that? Not very often. So 3 things I would print out: my flow chart and the 2 mode 6, and I'd have them handy by so that you learn to use this stuff. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, I just want to show you the 2 ways they report. The top one is the way CAN reports. Anytime you clear the memory on a CAN car, the default values in mode 6 are 0, 0, 0. Okay, so what I'm going to say to you for now, and I'm going to clarify this because we have what we call ghost monitors. I'm not doing that today. I think I'm doing that Tuesday night. When you see a 0, that could be your blocker. But I'm going to show you what we call ghost monitors that are follow-up tests if something should fail. They might be 0 and there's nothing wrong. And again, I'll get into that Tuesday night. Now, if you go to a pre-CAN car, there could be any number in here. This could have been numbers they dropped in right after a memory clear, and the car never ran. So that was a disadvantage of pre-CAN cars, is it was up to the engineers. They put in whatever they wanted to as a default. It might have been 0. It might have been a value max over here with a value here. You couldn't tell. That was the good, bad, and ugly of it. And many of you were in the class back in 07, if you remember back that far. And we looked up all this mode 6 stuff just so you had an understanding of it. Okay. Okay, so that should do that. Now,
as long as it increments, so whatever the manufacturer puts in there, if we look at it and it says 26 this time, we don't know if that's the result. But if we drive it,
if you just cleared the memory, Ken, if you just cleared the memory, that's a default value they drop in there.
So then if I drive it and it goes up, then I know
up or down.
Right. Okay.
And let me give you a little clue. And I learned this from Ford, and I can't say this for all manufacturers. When you see, if you've just cleared it and you see a number in there, that is what I call their fast pass number. So if you are that number below, you're done the first trip. Okay. If you're above that number, it might take 2 trips because it wants to be sure. Does that make sense?
Yes.
There's a ghost there, and you don't get to see it on a lot of cars. Every car has it, but you don't get to see it. So I've seen it on Fords where they actually put a value in after a code clear and memory clear, and there's a value there, and it's a lower number, and it's basically saying if you hit this number or beat it, that's a fast pass. If you don't, we're going to run this multiple times. So good question. That was the problem with pre-CAN. CAN, it's easy. All zeros. In 95% of the cases, if you see a 0, that test hasn't run, that's probably your blocker. But there's going to be 5% of the cases where I'll show you tomorrow, Tuesday night. It's a follow-up test, and I'll show you how that works so you know whether to be concerned about that or not. Okay, so here's an example. Sorry, it's not the best capture, but it's what I got sent to me. If I go down here, these are all O2 test results. Notice 06, 06, 06. This is bank 2, sensor 2. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Nothing is run on that one. But I go over here and bank, anyone want to take a guess at 02, which sensor that is?
Hmm.
Bank 2, sensor
2.
1.
Oh.
And look at what we got for 2 of those. What do we got? We got pass with numbers. We got pass with numbers. And look at what we got down here. We got one test that's sitting where? At 0. That could be my blocker right there. That could be that PO133 that I need to flip the flag. Remember, guys, you haven't even gotten out of the driver's seat yet. And you would have been done 45 minutes ago after you learned this, what you learned in this class. But we're taking a long time to do it. You haven't left the driver's seat.
I got to ask a dumb question.
No, go ahead, Ken.
So I see, so on the one on the right, I see the 0 is the value, right? So if I go in there and I see that, so at that point, I would probably want to go look at, say it was a PO153. I want to go see what the enabling criteria is and drive it in those conditions. Is that what we're doing?
That's what you'd be doing. If you can find it, but you're going to know that if it's a front O2, it depending on if it's an oxygen sensor, it's probably going to be tested at a steady throttle. If it's an air fuel sensor, it might be a steady throttle or it might be a up and down. That's really what it's going to come down to. But yes, absolutely what you said. Now let me ask you this, Ken. Can you tell me on the right? Can you tell me on the left page that the monitor, as the expression we use, the monitors haven't run on the left side of the page?
I would say yes, because they're
okay,
all
good. On the right side of the page, could you honestly call me up and say the monitors didn't run?
No.
What you would tell me is, aha, 2 of them ran. So whatever I was doing okay on those, but there's one down there that's preventing me from finishing off the testing. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
And I'm going to put this on a Nissan later at the end in a case study to show you exactly how this works in a box format. So stay with me on that one. Remember, we're only moving up the pyramid right now. Now you see it. Now I know why you looked at this and got excited. Okay, we talked about the Fords again and how they do it, how they broke these up, how the cat, and on the camshaft down here, the important thing to remember when it comes to variable valve timing, it's not doing performance in the sense of operation while you're driving. Basically, what it does, it'll move it out 10 or 15 degrees and return it. Quick test. You might just start it up, driving around the block. You might just start it up and idle it. Then the PCM will advance it to a certain point and return it and look for a degree of error. That's all it does for the VVT monitor. It is not checking all the VVT tests that are possible. So understand, and this is one of the things about mode 6 and monitors, excuse the term, monitors, flags that people used to complain about. Well, I don't use them because I've seen the systems fail even with it. Absolutely, they could. Because it depends on which test flipped the flag. But there could be performance problems from sticky solenoids, okay, that it's going to flag with another DTC that doesn't flip the flag. And I'll show you this tomorrow on an EGR. Okay. Okay, now we're moving down the box. It says if none are present, check for changes in mode 6 test results. In other words, there's no codes. If there's any changes in those tests, then something's gone on. So example B, I'm going to jump back here to one Ken was talking about. There's changes in mode 6 right here. So I know I was doing something right, but I've got one down here that hasn't changed. So I need to make sure that I go find the enable criteria so I can go back and retest that vehicle. Okay, and then the other magical thing is it may need multiple tests. And let me show you a quick glimpse of what that might look like. I'm not going to get into detail here, but if you read that article I sent you on the Honda Cat, you will see what I'm talking about here. So basically what it does is it weights the test results. It says, it didn't fast pass. Remember earlier, Ken asked me that question. There was a 26 on the pre-can car. And I said, think of that as your fast pass number. If it didn't achieve that number in the first 2 trips, it might say, look, I'm not sure that this is working the way I wanted to. So I might make it go through 6 full trips before I'm going to allow that flag to flip. Okay. And what it does, it basically weights each reading that it gets and establishes a new average. So it's up here, it's down here. So it filters it out. It says, okay, after 6 tests, I've drawn this conclusion that this cat is good or it's not good. And again, I have a case study for you on Tuesday night that's going to teach you this in more detail. I'm not going to get into this too much right now, but you get the idea. Okay, so here's the whole chart. This is what I would print out. I would print out the mode 6, maybe laminate them, put them in something so you have them handy. I promise you, when you're dealing with handling incomplete readiness flags, this is where you want to be. Did someone drop out? Let's see. Oh, who's waiting to go? Alberto dropped out, and okay, let me get them both in. Good, and notify me. Okay, are we good there? See how this all pulls together? Now, guys, we're still only moving up the pyramid. You still don't know what a lot of this stuff means. Now we're going to start looking at it. Okay, so let me get this. Oops. Okay, now let's go back to box number 2. And that's what we want to really hit on now for the next little bit. And we're going to take a break here shortly when we do some questions I'm going to send you. Now, remember what I said. For 2008 and newer, check mode 9. It's called in-use performance tracking. As Ken and I were talking before class, to my knowledge, the only one that doesn't use this, if you have Bernie Thompson's e-scan from ATS, he doesn't have it in there, but I'm going to be contacting Bernie. I know Bernie fairly well over the years, and I'm going to say to him, hey, we talked about this. You need to add this to your tool. It's a valuable diagnostic thing. He's got all this stuff in it, so why not put it in there? So here's what it is, guys. You don't have, first of all, you don't have to buy anything for this. It's already in your tool. Even if you haven't updated your tool in the last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it's in there. It's in Global OBD2 whenever you put your CAN program in there. Basically, what it is, it's a quality control check for the manufacturers to make sure that they're running their monitors, excuse the term monitors, flipping their flags with enough frequency to keep the Air Resources Board happy. Now, you know what this means. You all went through this. Many of you did. Some of you are younger. Vehicle OBD2 came out in 1996. Maybe 2000, they started getting their first inspection. And their monitors, excuse the term monitors, flags weren't complete. So they got to go to the referee and get an exemption till the next inspection. And then the next inspection. Then the next inspection. They kept getting exemptions. And all of a sudden in 2012, BAR said no more exemptions for incomplete monitors. That's the way it was said. That's the way the bulletin said. So you either had to fix it or you had to basically scrap it. And some of these cars were so far out of warranty, the OEMs are no longer obligated to it. So think of your BAR 97s. If they had done a quality control check on those every year for real credibility, we might not have had some of the problems we had, and they might have lasted even longer. The same thing with this. This was a way to make sure that cars weren't getting buried out there because they needed a fix, they needed a part, or they needed a reflash. This was quality assurance for OEM. Now, what do we do to it? We turn it into something for you. So here's what you want to remember. Before quoting a price to run and set a readiness flag, the technician can quickly review Mode 9 and Global OBD2 to identify the frequency at which a particular readiness flag has run in the past. Okay, start there. Pretty general, but it's a clue. Look at the second one. This information, when understood, can indicate the type of driving the vehicle experiences, the type of vehicle it is, like a start-stop vehicle, and if a reflash has been performed on it. We can show you that, and we're going to show you that in case studies or examples today of how you use this to your advantage. And the most important one sometimes is that middle one, the type of vehicle it is, like a hybrid start-stop. Or what if vehicle experience is driving experience? Maybe it's Mrs. Jones who just never gets up on the freeway. That's a moneymaker for you. Okay, so we're going to put all this to good use. Then the last one, CARB sets minimum standards depending on the year of the vehicle and the particular flag as to what they'll accept as a minimum standard. They're very generous with what they're doing. And we'll get more specific on this and show you. Okay, so that's where you're going to use it. You're going to use it to your advantage, like we did Mode 6 when they said, that's engineering. They're not going to use it. Well, I'll be damned. We managed to use it. Thanks to Mike up at Air Resources Board, rewriting it for CAN. Okay, so the tools, Snap-on, you can see in-use performance tracking clearly labeled. And if you got a Snap-on and you need me to help you, when you go in there and you get a picture of it, hit the little bitmap. Don't use your phone. Hit the little bitmap. And if you don't know how to hook Snap-on to your computer, but even if you got a phone, take a good picture of it and send it to me. But there are ways for you to put your Snap-on data into your PC so simply. And there's a software package called ShopStream that's free that I'll show you. Now I'm going to use examples from that to show you how you can use that as a diagnostic tool. Autel, you got to go into vehicle information because they don't use the hexadecimals as far as the modes, and you go in and use performance tracking for spark ignition engines. As I mentioned to you, eScan, as great a tool as Bernie's tool is, he doesn't support it. I mean, it's not a big deal, but if that's the only one you're relying on, it could be a big deal. Even little code readers have it. So something to think about. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this a little different today. This is where we're going to catch it. Oops, let me get out of that. Let me stop share. Let me go back a second. Oh, there's Ken. Let me go back to the screen a second. We're going to do this a little differently today. It's going to make it hopefully a little simpler. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it right into the chat box. So everybody has it. So I'm going to send this to everybody. Everyone in meeting. So the link's going to be live and you can click on that. So let's do this. These are questions. These are pre-test questions. These are ones you probably you will not know possibly, but I want to see how you do before. So I've got 10 after. Let's go to 10:20 right now and take a break. Do these questions. Just click on the link in the chat box. If you didn't see the chat box, look at the bottom of your screen. Click on that link and it'll show right into quizzes. So let's take 10 minutes, take a break, stretch out, come on back at 10:20, and let's go from there. Okay, I'll leave my mic on in case anybody has a question. Let me stop share. You don't need that right now. I'll leave my mic on if you need holler, but I want to text because we're going to start answering them. So here we go. There's one of the answers right there. Okay, when we get into mode 9, in-use performance tracking, there's going to be 2 numbers per flag. The top one, what I always want you, because engineers wrote this, they go ahead and the numerator is the top number. What I want you to think about when you're dealing with this is think of OEM now. When you see the word completion, that refers to the manufacturer's enable criteria for running the monitor to the point that you can determine if the system was going to fail. It's very, very important to remember that it ran long enough to fail. That's why earlier today I told you I had 2 cases this week, one with an Equinox EGR and another one with a Town and Country 02, where after a reflash, the old parts were still in there. The car was still in the condition it was in before. And after the first test, it completed here and showed an increment of 1, but the flag didn't flip because it needed more testing. But it did run long enough to determine the system could fail. So it incremented. So that's the top number. So whenever you hear the word completion, think of OEM enable criteria. The problem is you can't do it just by itself because it's just one number. I could throw any number out. That doesn't tell you what your chances are of completing that flag. So if you notice, this particular one has 1,675 completions. That's the numerator. That's the top number. Okay. Take that across the board. Whenever you see completions, think OEM enable criteria. And that the monitor test ran long enough to determine if the system could fail. That's really the key. And I have that in your notes. Okay, the bottom number, the denominator, remember, these are engineers putting in a mathematical formula, is the divider, and it refers to carb conditions. And if you remember at the end of the day yesterday, we looked at the universal drive cycle, 10-minute propulsion time, 5-minute propulsion time above 25 miles an hour with a 30-second idle period. If you meet those, anytime you drive the car and during a trip, then they charge the manufacturer with a trip against their ratio to see if they're completing enough tests to keep the carb and the air resources board and EPA happy. And again, I'll show you this in more detail. So when you see OEM, when you see completion, think OEM. When you see conditions, think carb. And I'll explain this in more detail right now. Okay, so there are 2 of the questions there. The top number is the numerator. That deals with completions. The bottom number is denominator. It deals with conditions. And when you think about the carb trip that we're going to look at, that you saw yesterday as a universal drive cycle, We're going to look at it here in more detail. Okay, so it says, what is the definition of a carb denominator trip? So how does carb charge Ford, GM, Mercedes, Toyota, BMW with a trip against their monitor status? And it refers to the catalyst, the O2, the EGR, the VBT. They use this criteria. Now, we're not forgetting evap. We're not forgetting secondary air. We're only talking about these right now. Oh, geez, that looks like that universal drive cycle. 10-minute propulsion time. And that's the word they use, propulsion. 25 miles an hour, 5 minutes. You got to reach 5 minutes, one stretch, one cruise, and you got to have one continuous idle period of 30 seconds. You got to be less than 8,000 feet, and that's standard for every car. Temperature has to be greater than 20 degrees ambient. And if it's a hybrid vehicle or start-stop vehicle like that, it has to have propulsion time greater than 10 seconds to be charged. So what this means is for the bottom number to increment, you have to have this criteria met. Okay, that's how we increase it. Now, what if I got secondary air? Well, that doesn't run all the time. So it says here, we're only going to charge them for a secondary air trip if there's a 10-second commanded on signal from the PCM to the system. Okay, otherwise we won't charge you for a trip. So this is why you'll see that the secondary air, when it does have it, doesn't have a very high number because it doesn't meet this particular part. It might meet this for the other ones, but it won't meet this for the secondary air. Now, evap is something I've been teaching you for all you that took evap from me. I always told you, check the evap. It's key on, engine off. Requires ECT and IAT to be within about 10 degrees of each other at startup. And temperature, ECT, has to be between 40 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So what it means is if you turn the key on, that doesn't mean the evap can't run, but it's saying if you don't meet this criteria, we're not going to charge them with a trip. And I'm going to show you examples of this as we go through this. So just stay with me on this one. Okay. Let me look at something. Okay. So let me be more specific. Here's what we did yesterday, guys. This is the carb trip. I showed you this yesterday, 30-second idle, more than 5, you got to hit 5 minutes. If you stop at 5 minutes, that's a trip. And you got to run for 10 minutes. That is the definition of the denominator, the carb trip on the bottom. Once this happens, we say, okay, Mr. Herr, we're charging you with a trip. And we're going to measure your completions against our trips to see if you're meeting a certain ratio. If not, and we see a pattern on this, we may call you in for a reflash, or you might have to do a part update or something to get this thing to run more frequently. You're going to use this to your advantage. Okay. Now, what does this really look like? Well, I captured this off a late model GM, and this is exactly what we just saw in the previous screen. Notice they use the word propulsion time. It says inspection, maintenance, drive cycle for carb trip. No, we didn't charge the manufacturer a trip that time. And it's a lot of times you don't. You might go out and take the car and you have a way of driving it that you're able to complete O2, CAT, O2 heater, EGR, and you never do a 30-second idle. Or you don't run it for 10 minutes. Because of that, you don't get charged with the bottom number. No big deal. It's okay. No big deal. You didn't get run. So if you notice on this vehicle, it had a total run time of 3 minutes and 18 seconds. The idle timer is 3 minutes and 18 seconds. So basically this car got started up and it just got idled. So it only met one of the three. So it didn't get charged with a carb trip. Okay. So let's take another look at this. You're the first class to get this, see this, because I just put this in. This would be using Snap-on ShopStream. I put it into a program to show you that if you look here, you can see we hit over here, over in this little box right here, right there in this upper right-hand corner. Let me go in there a little bit. You can see right here, we hit the 10-minute timer. Now we can hit the 10-minute timer, but we also have to have 5 minutes above 25 miles an hour. So if you notice, we flatten out, so there's no time there. We go up, we go up, we go up. And every time we go up, you notice the timer starts to increment. If we flatten out, then the timer flattens out. Then over here, we stop before it reached 30 seconds on the idle. And over here, it hit 30 seconds with an idle. This is in every car out there. You just don't get to see it. Okay, so when you think of that bottom number, you have to meet these three things. Do not drive the vehicle trying to accomplish this for this reason. Now, if you decide to use this pattern for the universal drive cycle for permanent DTC, cool. But if you're doing this to make a carb trip on the bottom number, don't do it. Okay, don't worry about that. This is how they get a fraction to be able to get a ratio to determine if the monitors are being run frequently enough. Does that make some sense? Is that somewhat clear? Any comments? It's the first time I've had this graph to show you to anybody, and this shows it beautifully. But I'm going to reiterate to you, do not drive the vehicle trying to accomplish this trip unless you're using this pattern to clear a permanent DTC. You increment in the bottom carb number doesn't mean anything. Okay?
So
you just want to know what's the ratio compared to the top number and what are my chances. So let's take a look at one captured off a car.
So Ray,
Yeah, go ahead.
so that is the universal pattern driving for any vehicle for trying to clear the permanent coil.
That's what they're using as a guideline. Remember we said yesterday, though, never say always and never say never. So it's a starting point. It's a starting point. And when this first came out, Toyota advertised it as a good drive cycle for clearing permanent DTCs for misfire and fuel system codes. But I've done this. I can run Nissans like this, no problem. The way their monitors run, if I take this vehicle and I don't even need the 30-second idle I do because it will do the VVT. And in some cases, it will do the heater. I'm just using a Nissan example. The 25, above 25 will get my O2, my cat run with no problem. But you know what? If I do that in 8 minutes and I don't hit this 10-minute number over here, it's no big deal. No big deal. It just means that I was able to run them in shorter time than a carb trip. But if I want a permanent DTC to go away, I have to meet all three of this criteria. Does that make sense, Joel?
It does.
Okay, we're going to see this more, but I don't want you to overemphasize this one. What I'm trying to show you is what you don't get to see so you understand it, because I don't like excuses. I want hard fact, and I want you to understand it, but I don't want you to worry about this. This is not something that you're trying to increment, but I want you to know how that bottom number goes up. You already know how the top number goes up. You've used the word enable criteria forever. Well, the enable criteria is met and it runs long enough to determine a failure, that top number goes up. Okay, but the bottom number, it has to meet this criteria. And then we use that ratio to determine the frequency with which the monitors are running. Okay, so let's put this to use here. Let's look at our first vehicle. We got the engine computer. We've got 346 monitoring conditions. This is the bottom number. So whenever you see this monitoring here, it's the same thing as the bottom number or the conditions. If you notice, 346, 346, 346, 346, 346, 346. This is an anomaly. A lot of times you won't see those numbers all the same on the bottom. But for now, I picked this one for a reason. Now let's look at the top one. 182 out of 346. What's the ballpark ratio there? What's the success rate there? Anyone got a ballpark number? Is it over 50%?
About half.
About half, maybe a little over half. Okay, yeah. So you got what if I tell you, you got a 50-50 chance of being successful if you quote that job? Feel good? Or do you have any reservations? 50-50.
Flip a coin.
Flip a coin, exactly. But how about here on the O2? Carb trips are 346, but look at the completions for the manufacturer. How easy in your mind is this O2 to run?
I'll take that one. That's easy money.
Thumbs up. How about the secondary O2s? Looking good?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to come back to this one for now. We're going to explain this vehicle a little bit later, but this is how you're going to use this to your advantage. Okay? You're going to use this to your advantage to say, hey, I can confidently quote that. I can run those, set those flags, or I got some issues. And I've got case studies to prove that to you. So here's another one. This happened to be off of a Toyota Sienna. you can see on the left here, 2617 on monitoring conditions. So if you notice, that's the same. Use the word conditions here and the word conditions there. 2617, 2617, 2617, 2617. But we get down to evap and it's only 1074 because how many times do you start a car up and the engine's over 95 degrees and the IAT and ECT are apart? Lots. Any warm restart, right? So they're not going to charge evap trip because they didn't meet that key on engine off criteria that we talked about earlier. Now we drive this vehicle, and one thing I want to emphasize on in-use performance tracking, do not drive the vehicle and then go into mode 9. Shut the vehicle off, come back into mode 9. If you want to see if the vehicle ran that time, it has to cycle off and restart for this to update. So we took the Sienna, we shut it off. Notice what happened. Next key cycle, we started up. It was 2618, so it incremented by 1. Engine starts incremented, CAT incremented, O2 incremented, EGR incremented, but evap did not increment. Okay, no big deal. But what do we know on that last trip? Those monitor tests ran long enough on the top number to determine that the system could fail. And because they did that, it incremented. Now, if it had failed, it was still increment. If it passes, it increments. It says, did it run long enough to determine a failure? Cool. But how do you like your odds of running this Toyota Sienna, running the monitors? Excuse me, setting the flags.
Looks
Feeling
good.
pretty good? Yeah, it's a warm, fuzzy feeling. Even on evap, I'm at 70% roughly. I'm feeling pretty good about that. We'll get more into that as we go along. Oh, you getting an idea how we're putting this to use now? We're going far from it, but when you get the examples, you'll see. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Carb conditions. That's really what this is. I wish they just said carb conditions rather than monitoring conditions. This is the bottom number, 1464, 1459. This is where I tell you guys, do not overanalyze. You would think if it ran long enough to get carb trips for the O2 and the CAT, they should be identical because they take the same criteria as far as carb. But you don't know the vehicle history. It could have had a light on for a period of time for just a few trips, could have been on intermittently, and for whatever reason, it wasn't charged. The O2 wasn't charged with a trip. We don't know why. Don't panic. Don't overanalyze this. Don't even give it any thought why they're different. For some reason in the past, we charged 1,464 carb trips, but only 1,459. So somewhere in here in the past, this O2 monitor was suspended for 3 carb trips. We don't know why. Maybe there was a pending code. Maybe there was a pending code or a real DTC. And when that happens, carb doesn't charge them with a trip. So again, I don't want you to overanalyze this. Don't nitpick at it. Just realize that can happen. It's not always the first one I showed you where everything was 346, 346, 346, 346. I've seen some wild ones. Okay, now here's that. Can we increase the top number without increasing the bottom number? So in other words, can we get a manufacturer trip, but not get a carb trip? And the answer here is look at this on evap. How could I do this? Anyone know how we could do this on an evap and not get charged with a carb trip? What kind of system does Toyota utilize? Running or key off?
Key off on the newer
Key
stuff.
off.
Yeah, like at night in the garage.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you ran it in the garage overnight. The car wasn't being run, but you completed the manufacturer's definition of a trip, but you weren't driving the vehicle. So we're not going to charge you a carb trip. Simple? Makes sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, now you can see it. This evap monitor, don't tell me they won't run. Look at that. You're at a 1.35 ratio. You're taking that to the bank. You could even say, I can quote you this, but I need 5 hours after shutdown for that test to run. And this vehicle had that.
So again, I got another stupid question.
Oh, go ahead, Ken.
So I got a car that comes in with incomplete monitors. I'm going to pull mode 9. I'm going to save it as a data file somewhere. I'm going to go out and drive the car to see if I can get the OBT monitoring conditions to increment from my current number that I saved the data from.
Yeah, I want the completions increment. I don't care about the carb.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I'm
then
only using what comes in the door, Ken. So I'm using these when it comes in the door as giving me an idea what my chances are to successfully flip that, run that enable criteria and flip that flag.
Okay.
I'll give you a good example. Do any of you guys work on Ford Transit Connects, the small ones? Okay, we'll talk about this a little more, but I'll just give you an example. The technicians are getting their butts, and some really good technicians have gotten their butts kicked on those. It's one of those vehicles I wish I was still at the college and had it there and I could run it and run and run it, because they're having no luck doing it on demand. Yet I check with the state, and the state tells me that those Ford Transit Connects are completing their EGR flag completions 63% of the time. So that means under normal driving, the customer's having better luck, not even knowing it, running the EGR monitor, excuse the term, flipping the flag, but running the monitor. It's really what you're doing is completing the enable criteria. But the technician on demand, because they're in a rush, a lot of times can't do it. So that's where you can be misled, that if you see a high number, was it easier to do with just daily driving than it was for Ken to take the car out and do it on demand? That can happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to point out these things to you that we've learned doing this. And like I said, coming off a hot week this week, 4 or 5 vehicles, it's really great. But guys are now looking at this. Even if they need help, they send me a picture. That's the starting point. But they're starting to send me the right pictures. Okay, so let's look at this one. Can the numerator again increase without the bottom number increasing? Absolutely yes. It just means that the bottom one on this one, it didn't go, remember, it didn't do it did it 2,412 times. It did the 10-minute drive, 5-minute cumulative time above 25 miles an hour with a 30-second idle period. That's all it means. That's all it means. But it's giving you a ratio looking at this. How easy is the EGR and the O2 to run in this car? You got bet money on it right now. You putting up some money? Are you willing to put up your time and charge a customer to run this O2 and this EGR based on those ratios? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, that's what's my starting point. Okay, so let's see how we get the ratios. Okay, so there's the OEM, there's the carb. We got 1,675 OEMs and 1,450 carb. The ratio is 1.16. You have a 1.16 chance of over 100% chance of winning the lotto tonight. Are you betting on it?
Of course.
Of course. That's how this works. So let's take a look at another one. Let's go. Well, let's look at their numbers. You don't need to memorize this or anything. This is just to give you an idea what carb sets and how generous it is. Secondary air, 25% of the time. Evap with the 20,000-inch leak, 25% of the time. But evap with the 40,000-inch leak and purge flow should run 50% of the time. And we're going to talk about this on, I think I saved that to Tuesday night. We're going to talk about evap does run, but it's a series monitor and it gets interrupted. We'll get back to that. Catalyst, O2, EGR, VVT only has to run a third of the time. So what that means is the top number to meet carb standards only has to be a third of the bottom number. But let me ask you, if you get a car coming in and the top number is only a third of the bottom number, how confident are you now you want to quote the job and take that customer's money?
Not too confident.
Yeah, so there's a little red flag there, isn't it? That's what I'm trying to get in you guys. I'm not telling shy away from it, but I'm telling you there's variables that go into that. It might be Mrs. Jones and the car just needs to be driven at higher speed. It might be a car that just needs to be driven more. It might be just running zillion short trips. Think about it. Could you just be driving around town above 25 miles an hour for over 10 minutes with a 30-minute idle period and get charged with a carb trip? That'd be easy to do like on a delivery vehicle. Just driving around town, 10 minutes above 25 with a 30-second idle? Yes or no? That'd be easy to meet. Never get on the freeway? Come on. Let's hear some voices out there. Yes? Yes. The answer is yes. You could be driving around town, but you're in the Bay Area here, you're driving on El Camino. You get over 5 minutes of driving above 25 miles an hour. You run for 10 minutes and you have a 30-second idle period. So that's easy to get a carb trip, but you never go on the freeway. So that's going to make your ratio skewed. So you're going to need to use this and look at the kind of driving it's had, the number of engine starts it has, and say, oh crap, this vehicle's just driven around town. That's my issue. I was doing training for the San Mateo County, and we were teaching them this. And they had a Ford Ranger. It would look great on all the Mode 9, except we got the EVAP. And EVAP was a ridiculously low number. Was it a problem? No, because what the guy said to me, oh, I know what it's doing. I said, what? Well, those vehicles follow the meter maids around every day, short trips, low speed trips. And then every day they come back in, they fill it back up. Well, what does that do to the EGR monitor? Does that kill it right there? So this is why I told you earlier, you've got to understand that it also shows you the type of driving that's being met. We're going to look at a couple incidences like that. So don't lose sleep over this. Okay. And this air, go ahead.
I was looking about that one here, the fuel system, air radio cylinder balance too. I had a vehicle like that one, but I didn't kind of really understand, the criteria they are using.
Joel, we got that in the end of the lesson on Tuesday night. Okay, so stay with me on that one, buddy. But you can see how dependable they think that thing really is. Look at the ratio. 1 out of 10. Okay, because if it's just something that's a little hard to run. This has been out for a while. If you look in your scan tools, you see something that says engine roughness, or some of you that have been around a while, remember in the old days of knock sensors? When the engine knocked in the early cars, what happened to timing across the board?
Getting retarded.
It retarded the whole engine, didn't it? Then I remember Chrysler's, one of the first ones to come out, they had a fast computer and they had turbos, and they could retard the timing by cylinder. They knew which cylinder detonated and they knew which cylinder to impact. Well, that's what we're doing now. We've reinstituted with smarter computer, faster computer, better diagnostics, and we're going to look for air fuel imbalance coming out of the cylinder using the O2 or engine torque to determine if we've got some engine roughness that's not going to show up other ways. Okay, so stay with that. We'll talk about that Tuesday night. Now look at the secondary air or secondary O2. They're only saying it has to run 10% of the time. And we're going to find out that if you got that secondary O2 only running 10% of the time, you may have some issues. Okay. We good on that? Okay, so here's another one just to show you how ratios come about. Too many variables on this. Do not make a decision on this. Let me ask you this. Does it meet the carb standard?
No.
What was the carb standard for secondary O2 down here? 100?
Yeah, good go.
Where are we at?
Okay.
We're well above it. But
Right.
again, it's only a third of a chance. So we got to think about what might make this run. We might be just the driver. So I want you to be careful with this stuff. I'm trying to show you the both, like when I taught you mode 6, we showed you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Well, we want to show you a little variations here. I'm not saying there's ugly here, but I'm saying I don't want you to overanalyze this. Okay. You may have some cars that have VVT and EGR together, but they only have one reporting line. And what they'll do is report the one of the two, which has the lesser performance. You won't know which one, but it's something that's out there. It's not going to happen a lot, but just beware that could happen. Okay. You have EVAP. You have the 40 thousandths of an inch leak. You have the 20 thousandths of an inch leak. They report separately, but the EVAP monitor all goes as monitors. They report separately, but they all go into one ratio. And again, I'm going to show you that on Tuesday night where people say, oh, the EVAP doesn't run. Hell, yes, it runs. It doesn't complete because it gets interrupted. And I'll talk about that Tuesday night. The problem is we've gotten away from that because it's not required to pass the smog. Okay, so here we go, guys. This is the chart that shows you what I showed you earlier. I got this from Ford, but I can tell you, I've checked out a lot of cars. These numbers, these codes are fairly close to standard. So what it says is if I want a 420 to flip the in-use performance tracking for the O2, I've got to run the enable criteria for a PO 420. a PO 430. But look at the O2, the third one down. Bank 1, I have to run the PO 133 criteria. Bank 2, I have to run the PO 153. That's to get the number to increment on the top and possibly flip the flag. That's the one I'm looking for. Look at EGR VBT. 400, 401 for EGR. If supported, VBT, you can see all those codes in there, but there's a lot more codes for VBT. This is just a response. Did it hit the desired we wanted? Did it return back to the neutral position? That's all it's doing. There's other codes related to it. EVAP 456, 442, and we're not doing any. I don't know of anybody in our area where we're doing any 0.150. So 456, 442. That's what makes the top number integrate, and that's what helps flip the flag. And secondary O2, this is going to come up more and more, and you're going to see this later. These are the codes that need to flip to run the monitors that need. Remember, monitors are DTCs. They're the criteria for a DTC to set. These are the DTCs that have monitors that have to run to flip the flag, increment the top number. Okay. And diesels have the same thing. This is again from Ford, but I've checked out GMs and a lot of similarities. I haven't checked them all out, but this is the ones that flip the flags. Okay, so when you're looking for what I call these, I call them blockers. So if these tests haven't run, this Ken asked earlier about, do I go look up the enable criteria? Yeah, if you can go look up the enable criteria for PO133 and find out that that's the mid and the TID you're looking for, then that's the test you need to run to flip the flag. All those monitor tests I showed you earlier for O2s, a bunch of those may have run, but until those particular tests run or these secondary tests run, that flag is not flipping. Okay. So here's one from an Autel. This off, it's one I took a long time ago off my own car. Let's go look right here. And it says monitoring conditions, carb conditions overall, 2647, 2647. Let me zoom that a little bit because I don't know what kind of screen you're on. 2647. So those all match up. What I like what Autel does is if you generate a report, it tells you right here, you got almost a 1% chance, 100% chance of running that monitor, flipping that flag. You got a 1.4 chance. You don't have to do any calculations. They're doing it for you. And if I come over here, EGR VBT, how confident am I that I can run this Honda? Bet money on it?
Yeah.
I am today.
Bet money and shop time on it, and you're going to feel good about it. Look at even EVAP. 6.67%. That's really good. None of these are getting recalled by CARB, and they're just letting you know, hey, you can feel pretty confident that these monitors and these flags aren't hard to run and flip. That makes sense? And this is what I was telling you. This is off of 2007 that does not report, does not communicate through CAN as far as the engine, but they slipped in some of this stuff into the software. So you can do 5, 6, 7s that'll have this available, but it won't be a CAN car. So just pay attention to that. Okay. Now, there was a question on the pre-quiz, the little one I gave you earlier. The one monitor that does not report in mode 9 is the O2 heater. Yes, it is part of the O2 monitor in some cases. It is a monitor, but it doesn't report in mode 9 because they can't measure the emissions out of it. Okay? All they can tell you is it worked, it didn't work, but they can't get any measurable emission standards out of it, so they don't report in mode 9. So on the pre-quiz, the top number was the numerator. The bottom number was the conditions, was the denominator. It does not report the O2 heater in the way of completions and carb trips. So you won't see that on your list, but it is on the car. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Okay, let's take a look at this vehicle. What can we learn from this vehicle? It's got 14,000 miles on it. Let's get some feedback. What do you think?
Battery disconnect.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you that's a remote possibility. Here's why. When CARB wrote up the regulations, they did not require that this be stored in non-volatile RAM, which means if you did, and I have not seen any that would do that, it's a possibility. It's a point. It's like when you take an ASE test and you pick an answer that's 0.01% chance of being right, you get it wrong. It's that kind of percentage. So let's, what else could it be? What just happened to this vehicle? To reset this. I heard it. Reprogram. Now, I also want to tell you this. Maybe yes, maybe no. I'll show you when we get into case studies where in some cases it clears it. In other cases, depending on what it reprograms in the computer, it will not change it. But if I see something like this, first thing I'm looking at is a reprogram. The battery, I'm not even concerned about that. And you weren't even supposed to be able to clear these by clearing the memory. So when I see something like this, I'm looking for it's been reprogrammed. And if you do a reprogram, if you do reprogramming and you're using this mode 9, I would tell you to look at the mode 9 before and the mode 9 after to see what it does. So again, I'm going to refer to my Honda. And when I did it, it reprogrammed, it replaced everything. So when I got done at 124,000 miles and I reprogrammed in that article I sent you, I didn't include in the article. When I reprogrammed it, all the mode 9 went back to zeros. But I've seen cars where they're reprogrammed and they stay at the number they were at. It just depends on what the engineers felt needed and should be replaced. Okay. Camaro, we're going to see later, did that same thing. We've had a few of them like that. And I've had others where they don't. So don't lose sleep over this. Just know that if you see something like this, it's just been reflashed. That's the most likely cause.
So Rick, on those,
yeah, go ahead.
On those, when the conditions are zero like that, is everything just going to be automatically just set, like the readiness?
Well, everything will be blank at this time. So you're going to have to get the top number up.
Right.
And I want to caution you, this is what I ran into, like I said, twice this week. Once with a 2000, let's see, I'm trying to remember the year of the Equinox. I think it was an 2006 that had, I want to say it was a 6 with, no, it was 2012 that got a reflash because the EGR flag wasn't setting, and it fixed it. But the first trip it ran, this number incremented, the top number incremented, but the flag was still incomplete. He ran it a couple more times, and then the flag flipped. So this does not always mean that the flag is going to flip, but it does mean you did something right. And that's what completions are telling you. You hit the enable criteria. Whether it flips the flag may not do it. It may need multiple trips to do it. And then the other one we had to do the same thing was a 2012 town and country, exact same thing. Reprogrammed it. It ran a completion, but it didn't flip the flag. Then he drove it some more. He let it sit for 15 minutes. He started it back up, and it flipped the flag, and it increased the completions. So something we need to be aware of. So good question. Yeah, it'll populate everything as we go along, but I'll also show you what happens when you clear and it doesn't. Okay, how about this vehicle? Any issues here? Anything to be concerned about? You're doing this tomorrow on the job. You see these numbers. Any worries?
No.
You're feeling pretty good that this enable criteria is not that difficult to run. Okay. And I'll explain how the secondary here, or the O2s here, can actually be lower than the CAT, but you're not going to worry about it. It doesn't make sense because what are the reporting components for the catalytic converter to pass? What do we need? Information from what two sensors?
O2.
Front O2 and secondary O2. And you will see cases where, look at this example, the secondary is only 661, yet the CAT's completed 806. I'm going to explain that tomorrow or Tuesday night in what we call a parallel monitor. So you don't worry about that either. Don't lose sleep over that, but you'll understand it.
Rick, got
Yeah.
a comment on that one?
What?
This morning, I just was playing with my vehicle, and I cleared the coil before driving. It's a Honda 98, and it complete all monitors except catalytic converter.
After you started it back up?
Yeah, I just cleared in the morning. It was cold. All the criteria is met. I drive it and for like 10 minutes and all monitor got completed except catalytic converter, even the auto sensors.
How fast are you driving it?
Like not enough probably for the catalytic converter on time probably, but it was like 55 miles per hour, but it was like for less than 5 minutes probably.
And Hondas, if you don't run them for at least five, in those years, if you don't run them for at least 5 minutes, you're not going to hit it. Absolutely not. They got to be at least 5 minutes. They even have bulletins out. Matter of fact, I'm going to say this. I keep referring back to it because it's so fresh in my mind. When I reflashed my PCM, it has said you must drive this at least 5 minutes to determine if there's a DTC for the PO420. So I think you just need more driving because Hondas usually aren't an issue. Okay. Now, remember this vehicle earlier. This is the first one we looked at. Everything was 346, 346, 346, 346. Now, let me give you a little history on it. Now's where we need to know something about the vehicle. This is a 2016 Subaru. This was captured probably 2 years ago. Had 30,000 miles on it. She needs a smog. How do you feel about finishing this car up for her? Come on, you guys out there that can talk to me and tell me what you think.
Right.
Okay, what would you recommend looking at these numbers? You get people up all the time calling you up to you want to diagnose over the phone. So I'm giving you these numbers and I want you to tell me on face value, what would you do to get this vehicle to pass? Based on the information, the odometer.
For the freeway?
Drive
Yeah.
it some more.
Everybody agree? What kind of trips does this vehicle probably experience?
Sure.
Few.
Short trips.
Yeah.
Okay. You look at the driver. Well, this driver was a close friend, almost like a daughter. She was probably 39 at the time. She's not a little old lady, but I know how she drives and I know where she drives. Matter of fact, I picked her car up over in Walnut Creek to drive over here because if you ever dealt with their radio systems and try and get an Android to interface with it, those things were a disaster. Well, I tried for her and then driving it over here 30, 35 miles an hour, I got everything to increment. But just what we said, this vehicle just to be driven on the freeway. And maybe it's Mrs. Jones. Maybe she's a little old lady, never goes on the freeway, a little old man. And you say, hey, I can get this vehicle past, but I need to take it out on the freeway and drive it. And that's where I go with this. So you see how now you're starting to take these numbers. You got to know more than just the numbers. You got to know the kind of driving. Look at the driver. You know yourself looking at the driver sometimes. It's going to give you a clue how it's being driven. This is not hard to run. It just needs to be get up in the freeway. So this is how you start to use this, guys. Use it to your advantage. Okay. How about this vehicle? 745, 745, 745, 745, 745, and the completions are 506, 950, 464, 280. Yeah, what do you think?
Kind of the same thing, right? Driving conditions.
Yeah, and what else do we need to know? Do we have start and stop hybrids out there?
Oh yeah.
So if you get a hybrid in, don't be surprised if the numbers aren't what you think they should be, but it doesn't mean they won't run. It just on face value, sometimes you'll get them and maybe they've only been driven around town. Maybe they're driven in the electric mode. So look at the vehicle. That's why in that first thing I introduced you in mode 9, I said, start, stop vehicles. Okay. So this is how you put it together. Now, granted, if I gave you this and didn't tell you anything about the vehicle, they all meet CARB standards. You're doing fine. When I tell you it's a hybrid, all of a sudden I hear, yeah, that makes sense. So look at the vehicle. Okay. We okay on that?
Mhm.
Makes sense? Okay. I'm going to come back to this one for now. I want to hold off on this one for right now. I'm going to go into case studies because this is where we start to hit home with it. Okay. Here's your first vehicle, guys. It pulls in your shop. It needs a smog. It's failed for secondary air. You're in charge now. You're in charge. Somebody tell me what you think. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs down.
Thumbs down. Why?
It's because it's partially is meeting some of the criteria.
Now, let me ask you, Joel. I'm not picking on you, but I want to get you on that one. Where do you see it's partially meeting the criteria?
Because he's encountered the condition 77 times.
Okay, but whose conditions are those? OEM or carb?
Those are carb,
Okay, what about OEM conditions?
0.
Bingo. Stop right there. Something going on. Something going on with that secondary air.
What will be the discrepancy there? Why they can meet one and cannot meet the other one?
Because they're two different things. Remember, carb is the 25 miles an hour, 10-minute drive time, 30-second idle. Completion, the top number, is meeting the OEM's definition of enable criteria. Two different worlds. Separate those totally. You're only using this to get an idea. So they drove this car around 77 trips at least 10 minutes, cumulative time of 5 minutes or more above 25 miles an hour with a 30-second idle period. That's cool. But they never met the OEM criteria, which flips the flag.
That's blocked.
This is a red flag for you. Okay, if you go to my chart, you're going to check TSBs. There are none. There's no DTCs. This is a Maserati Turismo, 30K on it. It needs a smog. The shop does the smogs for the dealership. This dealership can't even deal with this. They don't know what to do. And we've had about 5 of these now. So what do we do?
We need to find the flag tripping enable criteria for the secondary air system.
Yep. And that would be what I call an educated wild ass guess, right? Because it looks like it doesn't work too well, Ken. So then we go to another one. And this is where, you know, years of experience. Where is this? What part of the world is this country, this car built in?
Europe, I think.
Europe. So then in my brain, and this is where my brain had to come into play, I'm thinking European, odd car, low production vehicle. Have I ever experienced anything like this? And my mind said yes. At the college, we had a Cadillac Catera. We call it Cateras, built in that part of the world. And I remembered back then that to get the secondary air, the O2 heater and the evap to run, I had to start the car up and let it. And you guys, some of you guys drove this car when you were in the class. It had to idle in drive with your foot on the brake for 17 minutes. So here's what it looks like. This is the drive pattern for that Cadillac. So I said, okay, let's just take a wild shot. I told the young man who, former student, shop owner, owns 5 Point Import Tires down in Redwood City, great tech. I said, Victor, you driving this home? He says, yeah, this is when he was still living in Pacifica. So he's driving this thing a lot of miles from Redwood City to Pacifica. I said, do me a favor tomorrow. I said, I'm going to pull a rabbit out of the hat. I'm going back to a vehicle we have. It didn't make sense, but it worked. I said, I want you to start it up tomorrow morning and drop it in drive and leave your foot on the brake for at least, I used 17 minutes at that time based on this pattern. So next morning, he calls me up and he says, well, you were wrong. I said, well, I tried. He says it went in 10 minutes. Smart ass. It went in 10 minutes. It flipped the flag in 10 minutes. And here's what happened. Okay. So is this car ready to smog? Can he send it back to the dealer to sell? Yes? No?
No,
I think so.
Yeah, the flag flipped. When this went to 1, the flag actually flipped. Now, notice I use the word problem solved temporarily. Why? In 2 years, what could happen to that car? Could someone inadvertently clear the memory for some reason? Could they lose a battery? And guess what? They're back to step 1 on this vehicle. And if somebody doesn't know that little trick, guess what doesn't happen? And we've had 5 of these now, and we've been successful with 2 of them. I got Maserati dealers that they have no fix for this right now. And CARB actually opened up a case based on this vehicle, but they couldn't do anything with it because there's not enough of those out there for them to collect enough data. But I also want you to know this. These vehicles, when they're inspected, this information is being collected. So it is going in a database. The problem is a lot of these vehicles aren't getting the smog until they're 8 years old. So are we catching these? And these were low production vehicles. Nothing ever came of this. Never heard back from Mike up at Air Resources Board. They did open a case study on it, but couldn't do it. But I've had 4 other shops that have contacted me. We've only had 2 out of 5 success on this. This case, it worked. We have used this on a Cadillac in the past, and we have used this on a Bentley. Shop called me and had a Bentley, and my brain went, well, where's this come from? Try this. It took 3 trips of this one to get it to go. So sometimes you got to pull a rabbit out of it. My point of this one is, guys, you see that? That is a red flag right there. You're not confidently quoting this job.
Rick.
Yeah.
What were like 17 minutes on the brake idle prior to do the test or after?
No, this one right here. And thank God this vehicle, we had the manual for it. GM actually produced a nice manual for the Cadillac. So we went up and looked at they actually had the drive cycle in there. And we went and looked it up, and it said flat out, start the car up cold, drop it in drive, and let it idle for 17 minutes. And that did it. It would run this Cadillac, it would run the O2 heater, the secondary air, and the evap. Back 17 minutes in drive. How they got through their certification process, I don't know. But who's going to do that? So once in a while, you got to pull the rabbit out of the hat. This is not the norm, guys, but this was the first time we ever used mode 6. And he sent me a picture. This is the picture I got. I questioned him. I checked him. I said, then I started thinking, hey, that's kind of like the Cadillac we had. Try this. And instead of 17 minutes, this Maserati did it in 10 minutes. And we've had one other shop have the same luck with the Maserati. And we've had a couple other shops that didn't have the same luck. Wasn't the same year. Something was different. But I'm just letting you know that the numbers are telling you, do not get cocky here and quote that job, because you know what? You're going to lose your tail on this one. And he drove this a lot before he finally contacted me. And this was, stroke of luck, whatever, but we got it. So and again, I showed this last class, but this is the very first problem we have. But I use the word temporarily because this vehicle could show up in your shop tomorrow needing a smog because it got a new battery or it had another DTC and someone cleared the memory. So that's why I said temporarily. But you see how this number is your starting point, your guide? Ken, does that make you feel a little warm and fuzzy about what we were talking about this morning and using this stuff?
Yes, it does.
You're not working harder, guys. We've been online now for 2 hours plus. This is not going to take you 2 hours to look at all this. You're going to be you're going to see that and say, whoa, red flag, red flag. Okay, let's go on to another one. This is the mom of my grandson's friend who we're playing baseball with. We're talking one day. She knew I was in automotive. She's got a Jeep. It won't pass smog because she doesn't needed the oxygen sensor monitor. So we go down the list and we look at the ratios. Yeah, they're a little funky. Something's going on with this vehicle, but these are running. But look at what I've got. Well, I blew it up over here. Look at that one over there. Look on the right. You see a red flag? You asked earlier, Joel, you asked about Chryslers. Look at the right side. You see a red flag there. What's the ratio?
0.
0. Stop right there. So if you go to my chart, the next thing you check for are TSBs. Now I want you to notice OBD2 encounters are 514 up here at the top. Just keep that in mind. I want you to remember that 514. Okay. So I knew this vehicle had a reflash and I told her that.
What year is this vehicle?
2014 Jeep 3.6 liter, 76K on it.
Oh, okay.
And this lady would drive, she would drive from Walnut Creek to Cupertino 3 nights a week. She was a nurse on a night shift. So she's not going to meet a lot of trips because she's driving straight shot down there, straight shot back. But the secondary O2, right on this one sheet right here, is telling you, stop, guys, time out. Don't go throwing parts at it. Don't go do it. Follow the chart, look at the number, and find out why that's 0. Well, I happen to know there was a reflash on this vehicle as I dealt with it before. So she goes into the dealer, and there's the reflash. She gets it done. It's fixed for free. It's a warranty item. And they got it ready, and she passed the smog. Okay. And here's the proof of it. Now, I want you to notice this. Look at what's already starting to happen. I checked this probably, I want to say it was after summer, probably early fall. It's probably 6 months I checked it. Now, notice all the numbers over here are starting to come up. But what do you notice about the secondary bank 2 sensor? Secondary O2. Look at what's happening right here. Now, is it up to acceptable standards for CARB? No, but is it increasing? Yes, no.
Yes.
Yes. Did the flash fix it? Absolutely yes. But look at the encounters. She had 514 for 76,000 miles. And we just reflashed, it was just reflashed 4 or 5 months ago. And she's got 752. What didn't happen when this vehicle was reflashed? What didn't happen?
Didn't clear the memory out, right?
It didn't reset the monitoring conditions. Okay. So here's a case where we saw that Kia earlier. It was reflashed. They were zeros. Here's a Chrysler that we see that was reflashed, but it didn't reset the monitoring conditions. It kept them there. So it can be either way, guys. It's nothing. It's not super important, but it does happen. So don't expect a reflash to clear it out. Okay. Sometimes they just leave it there. So this was a great case study. This is where a TSB, follow my chart. It hits most of the points. Okay. So we did I just put a little graph on that vehicle over time to show you that everything was moving up to CARB standards, and the secondary O2, which was the initial problem, was slowly increasing from the initial 000. There's your fix, guys. Sometimes you just got to look at the numbers. That's why I get people all the time at the college. You say, you teach scan tools? I know I don't teach scan tools. You don't teach scan tools? I said, no, because if you don't know numbers, scan tools worthless to you. Okay, same thing goes here. Before this class, these numbers meant nothing to you. Now they're going to start meaning something to you. You're working smarter, not harder. And before you quote that job, look at this information. Okay, let's move on. Diesels have this information too. I don't have a lot for diesels, but I'm just letting you know. And also remember, if you're on global OBD2, some of the terminology may not be the same as the OE side, so you may have to cross-reference them. But if you take a look here, diesels have the same information available. I was told by CARB the ratios are similar, but you can see what's running, what's not. If you go down the list, it looks like the PM filters, you can bang that out. The NOx catalyst monitor is a little funky, a little low. The non-methane catalytic converter, hydrocarbon catalytic converter, hydrocarbon converter is 253 over 100. This looks pretty good for a diesel. So my point being is, if you do diesels, you can use this possibly to your advantage. And here's another one. This just be sitting around the college to show you that even a vehicle being driven out in and out of the facility, short trips, sometimes you can hit a few of them. So it is available. Okay. Now this link here, I'm going to be sending to you. This is the Ford information that I sent you yesterday, or I was going to send, I used in the class yesterday at the end. I'm going to send you this link, so you should have it. It's called free. And if you're dealing with diesels, there's some good reading material in here to help you understand systems, locations, parts. It's a lot of stuff. Okay, here's a BMW we had. The guy came to class, didn't know anything about this, took his aftermarket scanner, and did some checking. He had a 2012 5 Series CAT monitor flag. CAT flag would not complete. Well, look at his numbers there. If you look at, I know it's a little broken up. I had to take it the way he sent it to me. So you're all getting less. If you send me some pictures, think about me having to use these or wanting to use these. But 0, 0, 0. We got an issue here. So let's go through the dialogue on this one. It's a little rough. I copied it just the way he sent it. As mentioned in class, car runs perfectly, no fault. Everything ready except CAT, of course. Attachments, he just showed me the mode 9, showing the CAT had never run since it was reprogrammed. Does this have 2 CATs? Yeah, because the pictures were a little broken up. What was a reflash for? He didn't really say. He says, but I replaced both DMEs. This has 1 computer per bank. and cat monitoring were complete within 5 minutes. So here's the bad part about it. Exhaust had already, the cat had already been replaced before he came to class. When he came to class, and this is a BMW tech, tied into the factory tool, using his aftermarket scanner, looking at this data after taking the class, he knew that that cat was not the issue. So then he went to software, and it turns out that it had the latest calibration in it. So it says, he says, he completed the monitor within 5 minutes. Thank you for your feedback. I asked him, was there, he said, was there a bulletin for this? No, I asked him if there was a bulletin. He said he decided just to best fix was replacing 2 DMEs and run it at 55 miles an hour. Okay. There he's saying basically, no TSBs, decision to replace DMEs was comparing mode 9 to the same year vehicles. So let's face it, he's got a bunch of them there. He's got a comparison and seeing these other vehicles are running. So you can see here, again, he's mentioned how quickly it ran. And it says, I said this to him, you mean the mode 9 you learned in the class that you sent me, were they warranty, customer pay? What I find interesting is you previously reflashed DMVs and didn't solve it, yet 2 new DMEs did. Did you have to program the new DMEs? If so, were calibrations loaded on the previous ones? Here's his final words at the bottom. The software version levels are the same when I reprogram the DMEs. In other words, he put in what was already in there. Somebody corrupted it. Somebody had tuned this and corrupted it. BMW stepped up and covered the 2 cats and the 2 DMEs, which cost over 16 grand, and they wanted the DMEs back for analysis. I suspected this car had a tuner before BMW's software couldn't revive it. The proud engineers will let me know in a few weeks. Never heard back from them. So my point here, guys, here is you see what he got out of just this little bit of information? The cat's already been replaced. Don't replace parts based on these before you look at these numbers. Zeros are not a cat issue. These are either going to be what we call the reporting components, which we're going to talk about later, or there's a software issue. In this case, somebody probably tuned it and corrupted the computer, as we're going to see in another case later. So you see how you pull all this together? And this is a dealer tech who doesn't normally use a global tool. And his factory tool won't show him this information. So this is a win-win for everybody, including the customer. Didn't have to pay for the 16 grand unless, if they did the reprogramming, had somebody do it, then they came out of the smelling like a rose. But he did this through mode 9. Okay, I'm just trying to show you how when you get done with this class, you start to look at this. And I heard Ken say this morning, he can't wait to get back to work tomorrow to try looking at this. I'm telling you right now, the only way you're going to get good at this, start looking at cars. If you got a scanner hookup, go look at them. Go look at them. Go look at them. Get a feel for it. Then he went and compared this to other BMWs, but he knew what to look for now. And we got another couple cases like that. And one's going to be a worksheet you're going to do later. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, let's put this together on an 18 road. This is that one monitor, excuse the term, one monitor flag, one flag that will not flip. It says not complete. So we go into mode 6 and get the best information we can. Nissan did a lot of mode 6 stuff, but their explanations were really weak. But I go in looking for P0133. P0133. Now there's multiples here. It depends on what car you're on. Down here, they call it response gain and limited frequency, which is a bunch of mumbo jumbo. What I'm looking for is way back in the beginning, I said to you the response rate, lean to rich, rich to lean. That's what our front tests have to do to be able to complete the monitor. So let's walk through this. Here's the vehicle. This is one, Ken, I already told you I'd lay this out so you could see it under. And you got to, if you got Snap on especially, you got to scroll the screen if you go into the mids, because many of these have multiple tests, and the little bar on the right has got to be scrolled to get them all. So here we are. We can't complete the O2 flag. It's got an air fuel sensor. So we go looking through here and we go into the first screen. We go into this one and we see a 000 on 018A. 01 is bank 1, sensor 1. It only has an inline engine, so that's all it's got. Test 8A, I don't know what it is right now. It's 000. Got data, got data, got data, got data, got data, got data, got data. So there's only one test that's hanging me up. Okay. And the way this one worked out was, let's see, this one didn't have the 8A on it, but it was basically the response. So we drove it longer and watch what happened. Next time we drove it, look at what happened to the one that was 0, 0 before. So everything is now populated. So what should the flag say now?
Complete.
Should say complete.
Can I ask, how do
Go
you
ahead.
know what the test ID 8A is?
That's the hardest part. That's where the manufacturers are really weak in
Yeah.
producing it. I know 0, 1 is going to be bank one, but the test itself, if I don't have any reference to it, can be the hardest part to come up with. So in this case, since they didn't give me the exact 8A, okay, I don't see, there's no 8As here. I just went from the old fashioned, it's the PO 133. And again, they give you a lot of information, but the accuracy of it sometimes just is not there. I'm not copping out on you. I've just seen too many of these to know that this information, had they given it to us in a better format, we could have been a lot better off. But I knew there was one more test we had to do, and all I could do is drive it again. I flipped that one, but look at what happened here. It's still not complete. So what's the second reporting component? The secondary O2. So let's go look at bank 1, sensor 2, or mid 02, 02. And it says, we got a value, no value, value, no value. Now let's see. I don't remember if 82 is on that list. Let me go back a second. Yeah. See, the problem was they didn't have this, and this is why I want to show this to you. The actual mid didn't come up. But so we drove it some more. And watch what happened here. That 0 turned into a number, and look at what happened. Okay. Our brain always in the past is go to the front O2s, the front air fuel sensor. Don't forget to look at the 02, bank 2, sensor 2. Don't forget to, excuse me, I'm sorry, that's E8. That's the 02 is the bank 1, sensor 2. Okay. But you see, we populated that number. And when we populated that number, we flipped the flag. Does that make sense? Okay. But the question came up about mode 6. Unfortunately, the ugly part of it is you can't always count on the published information. But I do know that for front ones, I'm looking at this one. For rear one, I want to find something that tells me this one right here, delayed response. And I'm going to show you what happened here. Now, remember the word delayed response. This is the one that's going to typically flip the flag. The front one is usually going to be the rich to lean, lean to rich ratio. The rear one is either going to be delayed response or it will be rich to lean, lean to rich ratio. So let's go through and let's go look at this. Does everybody see how that happened? So we got the front to complete all its mids and tids, I should say, but we didn't have the secondary. When the secondary finished them all, then we got them. So you just scroll through there looking for zeros. And I'll tell you on O2s, I have not seen any what I call ghost monitors. If you see a 0, take it to the bank that there's a test that's not being completed. Check how you're driving the vehicle. If you can't find the criteria, try and drive it again and see if you can find the criteria for actually driving the vehicle. This one actually required a little bit of a decel. So let's take a look at this. This is that vehicle. If you have Snap-on and you like to do this kind of stuff, ShopStream is free. You can download it from Snap-on Diagnostics. All you do is put in a model of your scanner. They'll download it for free. You transfer from your PC to from your scan tool to your PC, you connect it and you transfer these files over. Okay, so let's go here. Here we are, vehicle speed, steady cruise, steady cruise, steady cruise. We're going to go into a decel. Base pulse width, this is what Nissan calls their base schedule with no correction. Okay, so you can see it's moving around. What I start looking at when I graph these is I'm looking for flat lines. I'm looking for areas where something flatlined. So we flatlined our fuel injection here. We flatlined our fuel trim here. Alpha is fuel trim. And look at what happened to our rear O2 sensor. It went very lean. So what we're doing here is we're doing basically a fuel decel cutoff, delayed response, as I showed you in that mid that I picked up out of that. Now I'm going to blow this up so you can see it. What happens here, though, is you can see there's a little, let me see if I can blow that up a little bit. There's a little bump in fuel injection here. Alpha means we're adding fuel. And when we add fuel, what we're doing is taking away the oxygen from the cat. And what it's looking at is that response time. So let me go to the next one and show you a little better picture. Here it is blown up. You can see it's running a couple tests right here. It went lean. It's going, it's adding fuel. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to see how much fuel it takes to bring that O2 to a high number. I want you to remember that, because where you're going to get hung up, and this is where Joel was talking about in the Chryslers, a lot of times it's because you did not peg the rear O2. In this case, this is what I call an active test. In other words, you set up the conditions with your driving. The PCM does an active test at that time. It controls the fuel. It looks for response. Where there's other times where the only way you're going to get that rear O2 to go is you have to peg that thing over 750 millivolts to wake the PCM up to start looking at that monitor. So if we follow along, this is what I'm looking for on my scan tool. I don't have something up here that says O2 monitor complete. I don't have that. So here I am in a decel. My fuel goes flat. My fuel trim goes to basically neutral, 0. Alpha for Nissan is 0. My cat goes fully lean on decel. And then what the computer does, it injects fuel, adds fuel to see how much fuel it takes to bring that rear O2 up. And that's how it passes and fails that rear O2. So as we get into this on another car today and on Tuesday night, you're going to see you're going to have to become possibly the driving force for the rear O2. That will be your blocker. But to end this case, to show you, let's go back here. You're just learning this. You scroll through your data. You go through all the O2 tests. It's not complete. You find a 0, 0, 0. Okay. You may not be able to match this number up. So you go out and you try some other driving patterns and bingo, you're successful. Now they're all populated, but the monitor is still incomplete. Now, in some cases, this might complete the monitor or flip the flag, but in this case, it didn't. So you go to the secondary O2. You scroll through your mids. Don't spend a lot of time on this thing. Okay, you know this car only has a front and a rear. So 0, 2 is going to be the rear. You got your little chart. I got 0, 0, 0. There's my blocker, guys. I don't need to relate it to a code, but if I do relate it to a code, I'm going to go look up the criteria for it. Populate it, drive the car the correct way. Bingo, flag is done. And this is what I call an active test by the PCM to test the secondary O2 to finish up its testing. Any questions on that? Ken, did that box format kind of help you with what we were talking about earlier?
Yes, it did.
Scrolling through. Guys, I know this looks more than you ever see on your scan tool, but please make sure. And if you have an Autel, Autel does something pretty cool. You can save all data and it'll make a PDF file that you can open up and look at everything, and you're right on the scan tool. Snap-on, I did captures of these with my little bitmap button. But if anything, at the very least, I'm going to scroll through this. I'm going to scroll through all the O2 tests, and if it's populated, I'm cool. I'm trying to find the one that has a 0.
So
if it hasn't run, hasn't completed, there's probably a 0 sitting in there.
I got another stupid question. I'm just trying to wrap my head around all this. So it's easy to on the drive cycle, right? But if I have that rear O2 sensor, if it's on the fritz, it was too slow of a response. It's either going to set a pending code, but good. So my values are, well, actually, if it measures it, if it completes it, my value is going to go up, but it's going to be over the max. Is that what I'm looking for?
It could be at the max. I'm going to show you one tomorrow, Tuesday night, where we can't get the cat to run, and It's the reporting component that's marginal. And then I have another case study where it's setting cat codes and it's the reporting component.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to take a little judgment in there at times. And looking at the mode 6 max, min or max, depending on which one it has, if it's very close or just a little bit over it, just remember this, if it's over the max, if it's a max number, there should be a pending code with it.
Yeah.
If it's just below it, now here's the tricky part. If it's just below the max, it won't set a code, but this is what I'm going to show you on Tuesday night on this Lexus, where it didn't set the code, but it didn't like the results it was seeing. So it was in an averaging mode. So it wasn't going to finish the testing of the cat till it finished the averaging on the O2. So hold on to that one. I got that one for you. Okay. So guys, it's just a matter of you're in the driver's seat still. 2.5 hours later, hopefully not. Hopefully this is all done in 15 minutes where you're going through this quickly, looking for zeros, looking for mode 9, seeing what your chances of running. But I'm talking about sweeping through mode 9 and just looking for something like this. That's what you're doing. You're not worrying about the numbers yet. You're just sweeping through to find out, are there any zeros in there? So again, this is one of the reasons I brought this up, because Ken, I asked you this question earlier. Can you honestly call me up and say, Rick, the monitors didn't run?
No.
No, you could tell me though, I'm going to go down here, the flag didn't flip. Okay, now if it didn't flip, your first thing is thinking it's this one. That's what was the blocker. That's what's stopping me from flipping it. Okay, so you meet that criteria, you do it, you get numbers in there, it still didn't flip. So now you got to ask yourself, and this is one of the worksheets later, is what is the reporting component? It's just like if you got an evap problem, before you go testing for leaks, the reporting component is going to be your FTP, your switch, or the motor on the pump. That's what the reporting component. Any of those are skewed. How can you believe you have a leak if the reporting component's got a problem? That's what I got to keep pounding in your brain. Okay, and then the same thing. We find zeros here. And I tell you this, we haven't talked about ghost monitors yet, but I can tell you, to my knowledge, I have never seen a follow-up test on an O2 where it says, if this test didn't work, I'm going to do this test. If you see a 0, there's your blocker. That particular test is not running. In this Town and Country the other day, John sent me the captures and said, well, you think this is it? Well, he was on bank 1 and bank 2, sensor 2s, and he had zeros in the back ones. There was his issue. Okay, but it also needed a reflash. And after the reflash, he still had the zeros, and it took some more driving to get him to flip. So by seeing those zeros, it teaches you, don't tell me the monitors didn't run. A monitor is a separate DTC. What didn't flip was the flag, and that's what you're trying to get done. And there's going to be something in there blocking it. Okay, and by Tuesday night, you'll see there could be numbers in there like Ken asked, perfect question, and they're populated, but it's still not passing because it could be holding judgment because it's in an averaging mode. Says, I'm not going to run this next test until I'm confident this first test passes. Okay, so the Nissan, again, we're going to look at this a little bit more on Tuesday night, but the PCM is doing the control of the testing here. It's basically what I call an active test by the PCM. You just drive it. But if you're trying to run readiness flags, you're trying to run monitors, and we're going to look at more of these on Tuesday night, ask yourself, what components would you want to look at? And I only picked 3 on this car. And look at what I got out of this 3. I know that what triggered that rear O2 to go was this decel. That's what was missing. Okay. When I saw on this one right here, this word, and I want you guys to remember that, when I see delayed response or decel fuel cut, I know I got to put that into a radical decel fuel cut. Okay. So this is how we pull it all together. Unfortunately, this information isn't always the most accurate. Okay. Remember I told you, the kicker is when you have the 1. This is where you need the plan. All the monitors being incomplete, you start from scratch, you just go out and drive it, you have your way of doing it. But when you get done and there's 1 incomplete, and I used to teach back in the early OBD2, and I taught some of you this, is look at the monitors when the car comes in the door. If the car comes in the door, before you clear anything, and you see there's a not complete here and everything else is run, this is a red flag. This is saying, hey, when you get done with the job and you try and run these monitors again, that's the word we used back then, you might have a problem with that one. So don't get too cocky and say, oh yeah, I'll run all the monitors. If this thing has been driving and these are all complete and this one still isn't complete and that car hasn't been reset at any time, you got a problem right here. So look at that ahead of time. Pre-scan whatever you want to do. That's up to you. But get a plan. Remember, we haven't left the driver's seat. We're still following my chart. Okay. So let's move on. Okay, here's a great one. And unfortunately or fortunately, in classes following this case study, both the individuals who I've known for 25, 30 years were in the class. So it was awkward to talk about this while they were in the class. So here's a F-150 delivery van, 2012. Vehicle was in the shop for engine misfire. 2 fuel injectors were replaced to fix the misfires. Cool. The shop, then they cleared the memory that the shop attempted to run the readiness flags. They haven't talked to me yet. This is what they've done in preparation for a smog check. They drove the vehicle. This is where it came out of their email, or text, I should say. All readiness flags set, but the O2 EGO, which is their air fuel sensor, and the O2 heater, which on Fords is very common to see them both not done and then go together, not at the same time, but in sequence. So they replaced the front UGOs. Now I want you to start adding this up in your head. They replaced 2 front air fuel sensors, 2 rear heated O2 sensors. Ka-ching, 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 price is going up. After additional attempts, the PCM was replaced and reprogrammed because they couldn't get the flags to flip. What are we into price-wise right now? Anybody want to take a ballpark idea?
1,500.
Car?
1,500.
1,500, maybe $2,000, who knows? But it's expensive. So after a few more attempts, the readiness flags are still not set. So lo and behold, I get an email and I get a text. So let's go through this vehicle and show you the process. Told you we were building up to the pyramid. Okay. So let's look at this vehicle. Let's go to monitoring conditions first. 8171, only 8,107. Look at how many ignition starts. What kind of van did I say it was? It was
150.
Is it? Yeah, it was a delivery van, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So are we driving around town a lot?
Yeah.
We hit a lot of carb trips, but you look at that ratio, engine starts to carb trips and completions tells me this vehicle is doing a lot of short trips. This is before they did anything. This is all they sent me. Unfortunately, they didn't send me everything, but we're going to work with what they got. From what you've learned today, I want everyone in this group, whether you're talking to me or not, and I'm sorry if I missed a chat. Probably Chris had something in there. Oh, it's Alberto. I'm sorry. What a bag two. Sorry, I was way back, Alberto. I'm sorry I didn't get to that earlier. Let me see if I didn't answer that question. Let me know. I apologize. Sometimes the chat isn't on my screen and I didn't see it. Okay. I want everybody in this group today to think about this. You're on the job. You're an active smog tech. You're thinking about what they just did. From what you can see on each of those conditions and completions, based on what you learned today, what are your odds of possibly running those tests? Everybody. And if you don't have a mic or something, send me a chat. Tell me what you think.
I think good.
Okay, I heard Ken. Anybody else out there?
I agree.
I concur.
Okay, I heard it. I concur. Some of you that aren't speaking up, anything on chat, you feel, is there anything there? Pretty good, yeah. Anything there to tell you that this thing needs a new computer, new parts? Not yet, guys, not yet. And there's one very important thing they left off of this screen. Again, they hadn't taken this class yet, but I told them to get me this information. And they didn't know they captured this information before they did it, but they didn't capture all of it. But right now I'm looking pretty good. This looks to me up front like a driving issue. And again, this is before the PCM was replaced. They did capture this. I apologize. They did capture this ahead of time. So here's the dialogue we had. I asked them, did you do a cam clear through the OEM? This was before anything was replaced. Yeah, we tried to set up the monitors. And here's the famous line. We replaced the O2 sensors and tried to set the monitors again with no luck. And what I say to you is, I said, the key word here is luck. Yeah, we all want to rather be lucky than good. If the cat ran and passed, and I'm gonna tell you this, and we're gonna see a case study where it's not always the case. I've had two recently, but it does happen. But if you've got a 90, if you're taking an ASE test and the probability of that question is 98%, and you've seen something 2%, on that ASE test, are you going to pick the 2% answer?
No.
No. Okay, so I'm telling you that 98% of the time that you see that the cat ran first, you can take it to the bank 98% of the time that the O2s have fast passed some of their tests and they just haven't finished testing. Do not replace any components. Now, we're going to show you one case study that was contrary. But the idea is this stuff we're teaching you got to that person to that point. Okay, so they needed more time to meet the enable criteria session. So again, he's telling me all of them ran except next we decided to replace the ECM. It's like, oh boy. So we used the link to the Motorcraft website. I said, look at guys, I'll do the research for you. I'm more than happy to do the homework for you guys. You're busy in the shop. I said, we'll turn this into a case study. We'll get through this. So let's go through this. Here is the new data they gave me after the replacement. So now they've replaced the computer. They replaced the front O2s. They're driving the vehicle. And how do we look on the left side of the page?
Good.
We look good on the left side of the page, don't we?
Yeah.
Look at the right side of the page, which they didn't give me before they replaced the PCM. Do I know where my blocker is?
Downstream O2s.
You got it. Okay. Now remember, these are brand new ones. Unfortunately, they didn't give me this before they replaced the PCM, but now we got it. There's my blocker, guys. So now I got some homework to do. So I go to the Ford website, and there are the information I showed you earlier. The upstreams need these two tests to run. And obviously, based on this, what's happening in the PO 133 and 153?
Good.
They're good. They're running. Look down here. I got some tests for the rear O2s, and look at what's not running. That flag is not going to flip because I'm not running these monitors. Remember, these are monitors, and I'm not running them. So then I got to ask myself, what's the requirement for the rear O2? So let's go a little further into the Ford website. And here's to show you, when you look up DTCs, how I know that these are the codes that monitor test to flip the flag, because they're run once per drive cycle. I know that's the front ones. Okay, so we're good on the front ones. I also want to highlight something here. Let me pull something up here, because this is something a lot of people don't realize, and it's ignored sometimes. Look at this for no DTCs. Don't forget sometimes when you got monitors blocking, if you got an evap DTC in there, that can block some of the monitors. It's not something you would normally think about, but the evap issue could cause a false lean condition. So it's something I like to point out, that don't forget that. Okay, so we're cool in the front ones. We're not even worrying about the front ones. So we go a little further. We go into the heater. He's trying to get the heaters to go once per drive. There we are again. These are the codes for the heater. Amount of time it takes to test. So now we got a little further, and we pull up the drive cycle criteria that they call monitor entry. And look at what it's saying here. It's telling me that I need to be between those two speeds, and I need to have a change in throttle no more than 9 miles an hour, and an RPM of no more than 150. Now that you would think that would be a steady throttle. But let's go one step further. Let's go look at the rear O2s. And look at what the rear O2s need. Here's the numbers they sent me. You can see some zeros here. This is when they're trying to get it to run after all the money that's been built up. Look at this. Once per driving cycle after 3 D-cell fuel shutoff events. So you're doing this. You're doing less than 9 miles an hour. You're doing this. So you're going rich. You're going lean, which is a little bit of a fuel cut. Doesn't need a long one. Some need a long one. Some just need you to be the active test and go rich, fuel cut, rich, fuel cut, rich, fuel cut. A lot of the older Toyotas were that way. Took 10 miles an hour. Some of the Hondas were that way when they have air fuel sensors. So now we're zeroing in on a plan. This is all free information. It was just my time to do this for them, to be able to have a case study to show you guys. I need decel. But this is telling me right here, this isn't a major decel. This isn't taking and running down the hill and just leave the throttle closed. This is telling me I need to do a little bit of active up and down. Not a lot, but just enough. So then my message to him is, I told him, go out and drive it on the road. That's really hard to do on the dyno. He got on the road, and you guys know San Francisco, their shop was at 5th and Bryan. So they got on Highway 280. He turned off all the electrical loads. I don't think that was necessary. Drove it out Highway 280 towards Pacifica. He says, during the freeway drive, I just performed small acceleration surges about 5 to 6 miles. And that's that up and down, making sure not to downshift the transmission, which was a good idea. By the time I was halfway up the Pacifica Hill, both set. What a relief. Thank you so much. We appreciate the help. So what do we learn from this vehicle? Look at what happened. Look at the left. Any problems with the front O2s? Any problem with the rear one? Not now. What happened to the rear one? Did it complete?
The flag flipped.
Flag flipped.
15 conditions and 1 competition.
So going back to the very first page, what was really wrong with this vehicle?
Right.
In a nutshell.
No meeting the criteria for running the monitor.
Yeah, how the vehicle is being driven. How, because we got to get our heads into those secondary O2s now. You saw in the Nissan, I showed you, the secondary O2 is coming into play. We've been using the secondary O2 for catalytic converters the whole time, but you can see now. Now look at over here. Because of the kind of driving he was doing, he was having no problem meeting the first one. I'm going to jump back here a second. Excuse me for jumping. Let's go back and look at the first slide. I just thought of this. I want to show you. The only reason these numbers weren't higher, what kind of driving do we say this thing did?
Delivery.
Around town, short trips. Okay, this was a driving issue. With that many key cycles, engine starts, and that few monitors, that's a driving issue. Or it could be that, you know, this, but the key cycles don't indicate it, that this was a lot of freeway driving and that's all they did, but that's not with this many starts. So this is how you use this information to get deeper into the vehicle. Remember, they said we never use this. They didn't design this for us to use. We're using it to show you how to be smarter. And you can see here, and I'd be willing to bet this was a friend of theirs, so I'm sure he didn't pay for a lot of this work, because I don't think either one of those guys would say, yeah, but it needed it. I know them pretty well. I think somebody had some egg on their face and ate some of this job. But you see, the numbers aren't lying to you guys now that you understand them more. There was nothing wrong after the replacement of the PCM, probably nothing wrong with these before. 555500, the 0 right there, stop. Just like that Jeep we had earlier. You see the 0, there's your blocker. Do your homework. Understand that there's codes that trip these flags. Rear O2s also. He didn't give me a lot. Go ahead.
The previous, okay, these conditions. So these conditions are gonna be on every manufacturer. Like what I see now, you went here to like the criteria for setting up those DTCs, huh?
Yeah, and this is why I say the hard part is, and like someone said to me many times, if they had only standardized monitors or flag, you know, monitors to run flags, we wouldn't be spending so much time on it. Hard to imagine that I taught you guys this from 98 to probably 2007. We did this. You guys were in the shop running the dynos. This time of day at the college, we would have 4 dynos going, 95 decibels in there, running monitors. And we're still doing this 13, 14, 18 years later. Why? Because now we're down to where there's a butt kicker and things have changed. So my purpose of this class was to say to you guys, not take you from the beginning. I'm going to say there's one person in this group, Wesley, who's joined this class. He's not a smog tech. He's learning. Now I'd have to take him from the beginning to the end to make him a driver to do monitors. Most of you guys have done this stuff. This isn't about teaching you how to get most of the monitors done. It's what do you do when you have one that's kicking your butt, and that one's going to cost you a lot of time and a lot of money if you're not careful. So the idea is know the resources available to you. Some aren't very good. There's some, but look for things like once per drive cycle. That could be the blocker for flipping a flag. Look at all your mode 6 to see if what tests haven't run. So you don't call me up and say, oh, the monitor won't run. I can show you that the monitor, I'm going to jump back here again, and I'm going to ask the magical question to everybody. Have monitors run on this car? Well, let's do it before we get to this flag. It says not complete. Have monitors run on this car?
Yes.
Yeah,
Only one
but it
now.
hasn't happened is the flag hasn't finished. So I have to find out what is the blocker. There's my blocker. I fix the blocker, the flag flips. Okay. I didn't even have to record these other mode 6 data. I knew they were in there. They were done. I had to get the 0 to flip. And when that front and rear flipped, test was done. Okay. And then in this case, this was just a matter of they're busy in the shop. They're not totally understanding what's going on. And I'm telling you now, since about 2012, rear O2s are the butt kickers now. We're talking a little more about them on Tuesday night, but you got to pay attention to rear O2s. Okay. So this was a learning process for them. It's been a learning process for a lot of students. I would have loved to have seen the secondary O2 here, but they didn't capture that before they got rid of the other PCM. So, but I got enough data here to tell me that this is not a part problem. And there's no DTCs for those parts. And they probably should have looked at mode 6 better than they did. The mode 6 they gave me, and I'm not faulting them, it was all learned. This is what I'm looking for, guys. This is what I know. Look at where the zeros are. Everybody should know now that 06 is bank 2, sensor 2. And they didn't send me 5, but look at the zeros. So that gets me into this saying I've got to look at the rear O2. There's that word response again, response or delayed response. Okay. Yes, there were some O2 tests here that did run. The 06 test that did run. Okay. But it wasn't tied into the flag because the test ID isn't even on here for that. So there's the code with the test ID telling me I need to run the criteria for this, and here's the criteria. So if you're dealing with Fords or GMs, you need to use the 2 links I'm going to send you, put them on your computer, have them available, and do that homework so you're not wasting time out there. And I'm sure there's some of you who've been having a lot of the GMs in the mid 2000, early say 2006 to God, even as recently. Some of you guys may have trouble with running those. They're the only monitor that's not complete, flag that isn't flipped. The O2 is a butt kicker on some of those to run. And we're going to see this a little later. We have this case study coming up now. Okay, so everybody see how you use these numbers? Does that make sense? Ken, does this kind of reinforce what you talked about this morning?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to pick on you because you were so excited about this. It's just understanding what's in your hand, guys. It's not buying anything new. And then what we learned from this is, no, don't call me first. Use this plan. And if you use this plan, it works. Okay, let's do this one. We're getting there. This was initial smog in California. It came from Oregon. 2018 Camaro, 6.2 liter. This one I think was supercharged. Yeah, it's right there. You can see it only had 13,500 miles on it. So this is going to pull together a lot of what we've done the last 2 days. Here's what he's dealing with. He's got CAT complete. He's not worried about evap. He's got everything done but that O2 again. Okay, so let's go through the system. So we're dealing with that one monitor again. He goes into mode 9. Now, what you've learned today, this car has 13,000 miles on it. What do you think about those numbers? If I ask this on a test question, what do you think of those numbers? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Thumbs down.
Thumbs down, guys. How can a vehicle with 13,000 miles on it have only those numbers? I would say this would be next to impossible. So let me ask you what you've learned the last 2 days. Where does your brain go on this vehicle?
Well, it's got a supercharger, so he never runs a monitor run correctly because he's running from the police.
Oh, in Oregon, they don't enforce the law, remember?
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to get into that. But anyway.
For TSVs?
Okay, but before we do anything else, what are those numbers telling you could have happened?
The PCM is reprogrammed.
Somebody's been messing with this programmer. Okay, so let's go through this process. So far, so good. We're just going to walk through this, probably talked about it a couple times. Looked at the other ones, it's pretty consistent. So somebody's been tuning with this thing. We're pretty confident that's what's going on. So this is the question I said to you earlier, and I think Joel brought it up. This is using that GM website. So what we did, this was the calibrations for the vehicle. We ran all the calibrations. Cal ID, main operating system. We checked these in the GM database. This is what was in the car to begin with. This is what he sent me before anything was done. You see how the system is broken up into subsystems? So why you sometimes when you reprogram, you don't get rid of certain information. They're stored in different EEPROMs in the PCM. We're only going to replace that part of the PCM. We're not going to do it all. The fix was only for engine diagnostics or engine or operating system. So let's go through. So these are what came out of the vehicle. So he did a search on this and he found out that there was an update. There was an update for that car. But the numbers in the car he had all matched, these all matched GM numbers. Remember, this vehicle had been programmed, but these all matched GM's database. The only difference was there was a computer program to I think for the main operating system. For the main operating system with a different number here to fix this. But it wasn't a case that GM misprogrammed this vehicle. Somebody, I think, who tuned this had enough experience that they went in and created the algorithm for the CVN. So the part number and the CVN do match up to GM's numbers. We verified that. But he goes in and he finds out that there is a new software diagnostic enhancement for this code with this calibration. Okay, this one replaces this one. That's what I believe is in there. This was the previous. This is the update. So he goes ahead and reprograms it. This is the GM website I told you about. I'm going to send you the link to. It's got all the mode 6 stuff in it. So we go looking at mode 6, and he's trying to get the O2s to go. Or 02s are where?
Rear.
Rear. And look at what the rears are. They're zeros. Okay. We go look them up. This is how we look them up to see what kind of test. And when we get down to the 02s, we see delayed response, delayed response. So what kind of driving do you think this vehicle is going to need?
The decel.
Decels. And I mean some really good ones on this car. This was not like the Ford where it was this. It's a good rip it. He told me he took this through the Pacifica tunnel there and came out at 100 miles an hour and let it rip. And that's when it ran. He probably could have done it on the road. But anyway, I left it at that. Okay, 05s. I just threw these in here too because there's bank 1. Okay, he didn't. I don't know if I got the after. So what we did is we took the calibrations, and there's the new updated calibration. All these were on that previous page. This is the new one with the correct CVN. So the bottom line I'm saying to you here is his part number and the CVNs matched. So you couldn't go to this vehicle and see that the software had been tampered. But what if I told you that, and this he didn't tell me initially, when he turned the key on, he cleared the memory before he did anything, before he did any reprogramming. He turned the key on, and what you saw on the scanner, I'm going to jump back a second, bear with me. This is what he saw on the scanner without starting the car up. Do you find something suspicious right there that the cat and the O2 heater and the EGR ran with just turning the key on? He didn't tell me that at first. He didn't catch it at first. This is, hey, I just noticed that this thing, as soon as I clear it and I turn the key on, this is what's coming up. So somebody, we don't know what, somebody had been in that software and rewrote something in there. I don't know what they did with what tuner, but it wasn't matching up. But when we got done, this is what this was for a dealership. He was getting ready to smog it. As a matter of fact, my grandson and I were going to a hockey game down the Sharks game. So I stopped by there and collected all this information off the car. And then we communicated with pictures and stuff. So I knew now that this vehicle had this whole program rewritten. So something was tampered in this software here in the original, but it didn't show up in the CBN. And thank God for GMs that you can do replace and reprogram. So he didn't have to buy a PCM. He just had to tell it was replace and reprogram. So the whole thing was erased. New programs were installed. Okay. Now, notice after he gets done, what happened to all the settings. Here's one of those examples where they all went back to 0. Okay, no big deal. No sweat. We're cool. Now, look at your rear O2s. After he drives the vehicle, 05, 06, what's happening?
They passed.
They passed. 02, 02, bank 2, bank 1, excuse me, passed. Bingo, car's done. So my point in this one, and then let me show you the mode. Let me show you mode 9. It wouldn't be right if I didn't show you mode 9. Look at that. Okay. Look at that. 1 out of 6. Okay. He already got 6 starts or 6 carb conditions in a matter of a few trips where this car had 13,000 miles on it, and this is all you could get out of it. No way, no how. So this kind of pulls everything together. This pulls it together where we're saying, start here, follow my chart, go to mode 9. That's a red flag right there. Look at the miles, look at the vehicle, possibly look at the driver. He couldn't see the driver because this was a car that was traded in. Dealer, when needs to smog it and sell it, he's got to get the flag to run, to flip. And he's got this problem. And this we worked on for a while. Unfortunately, when he gets these vehicles from the dealer, he's got time to do them. And so there's a red flag, guys. There's another one. And then the software, we did our due diligence. We went to that GM site, looked it up. These numbers all matched up to the OEM. I moved things around. That's why it looks a little funny, but I wanted to have them on the same screen. I just want to show you that there's different operating systems in the computer. And not everybody shows them that way. Example being when the last one I programmed was my Honda, and it didn't give me that option. It said, here's the calibration, put it in. 20 minutes later, I'm done. It didn't say it was only replacing this part or that part. It just did it all. In GM, you might go in and just replace part of these. Ford, you might do the same thing. We don't know what the engineers are doing. Okay, so we got that so far. We went and checked for the latest calibration. This is all free, guys. We haven't spent a penny yet. Found the latest calibration. You had the capability of reprogramming. We went and looked up the mode 6 data to see what these ones here met. So again, 02, 93, 94, 02, 93, 94. This one actually 94 was slow response, lean, rich response, not the delayed on that one. But the point being here is that was our guide. And then I looked at these. You can see 92, 94 zeros. That's all I'm looking for. And this is either going to be a steady cruise or it's going to be a decel. Verified before the vehicle, after reprogram, all the calibrations were up to date. Latest was in there. Obviously, whatever this overwrote, fixed the screwed up software in the computer. There's someone to contaminate it. Didn't cost a PCM for the dealer. Reset the mode 9. Drove the car. Populated the rear O2s. Okay. Both banks and front banks too. There's the front one, 05. And we're good. And test is complete. And we got a completion right here. Now, I want to emphasize to you something I haven't put in here yet because it just came up this week where I have one to show, but I've had 2 cases this week where after reprogramming with the old parts still in there, this completion ran incremented, but the flag didn't flip. Because in the one case, the EGR, it was still seeing the older EGR. The reaction may not have been like new, so it needed a few tries to run it. Remember we said completions mean running the test long enough to determine a failure. So when that new PCM came in, it must have been something it was programmed not to like. It needed to see a few more trips, and then the EGR, the completions went up, and the flag flipped. The Town and Country I told you about the other day, he still had the rear O2s in it. After he flashed it, he had the same issue. Put the new O2s in it, drove it a while, shut it down for 15 minutes, restarted it, and Chrysler completed the O2 at that time. So guys, this is how you pull it all together. That's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of new stuff for you. You got it in your handouts. And I don't think there's anybody, many of you that would say, I think if I get this video and have access to this video on Rick's private YouTube channel, like the one yesterday, I'm not going to go back and look at this. I think from this today, there's going to be times you're going to say, hey, I'm bored right now. I need something to look at. And you're going to go back through here because remember, the text is one thing, but you don't get all this added stuff in the text. The book could be that big if we did that. So you get the recording to look at because this is a lot of information. And I'm putting together more case studies. And I'll give you a good example. If you get any late, this is one I still got to put together. If you get any late model Hondas, and if you get any late model Hondas that have, and they can even go back 4 or 5 years, if they have iVTEC, intelligent VTEC, without EGR, we're seeing these come in with almost 0 completions on the EGRs. If they have EGR VVT, if you have one that has VTEC with EGR, they're not a problem because those tests on D-cell. So here's what we're finding out on the late model Hondas. If they have iVTEC, it's a 2-stage VTEC. And what happens is the first one checks in the, I think it's the around 4,000 range. The problem is the second check for the VTEC, iVTEC, is not till you get over 6,000 RPM. How many customers are going to get those vehicles into that range? That's pushing up near red line. So what happens is you got to take those vehicles out. You got to not only do the cruise to get the mid-range test to run, you got to bury the throttle and then decel to get the VVT, EGR VVT to flip. This is just coming up. He's had probably, I think he told me, because what happens is he gets these military vehicles from out of state. And so nothing's been checked. So they have to be smogged here. And he's looking at them, and I've got captures of a couple of them where the complete conditions are high, completions are low, only for the EGR. The other ones, no problem. Focus on the EGR, and it's VVT, and it's a 2-stage VVT. So just the latest ones coming up. Like I said, I haven't got all these in here. There's been so much coming in lately using this. And guys, this information is coming from a lot of guys like yourself who are going back to work like Ken's talking about tomorrow and looking at this stuff and seeing that it can be a benefit. And that's where I'm getting the captures. And that's where I'm consulting with them on what to do. It's not that the answer is there. The plan is there. The guide is there. The information is there. It's in the end, what course of action do we take to solve the issue? Remember, it's only one. It's not all of them. Okay. Any questions on that? If that didn't light you up a little bit today, I don't know what will. Because Ken, was this what you wanted?
Yeah, no, that was good. I enjoyed it,
buddy.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
This is why I'm really been advocating this, and I'm trying to get the word out everywhere I can on this. I want even instructors, I want them teaching this because this is how you deal with smog failures. Pulling a lab scope out, I'm going to be honest with you, I'd say in this whole group, chances are maybe one of you are pulling out your lab scope on a failure. And what do you look at? With OBD2 cars, I'm not going to go pull my lab scope out to judge my O2s, to judge my cat. I'm going to work up all of this information before I ever get near those, if I even have to do that. So the idea is everything we did today was your scan tool in the driver's seat, looking at mode 6 and mode 9. Mode 9, then mode 6, and seeing what's in there to start out with. And think about that. And Ken, I want you to send me an email and tell me Tuesday night that you did this. And the first time you went in there to get that mode 9 and mode 6 information only took you a matter of minutes.
Will do.
Because it's right there, guys. And if you use the 2 charts, you use my chart for the plan, and you use the mode 6 guides, you know exactly what you're working with. And I don't care what car you're on, those charts are standard. Okay. We good? Okay. Yeah.
Rick, back on that slide on number 93,
93. Let me go back. Yeah.
How about all those other CVN numbers, like the engine, the fuel system? Would you have to just check those individually to see if those have been modified?
Yeah. What I did on that is I went here. Let's see it. I have that on the. I didn't show that on this one. Let me pull that up. Let me answer your question on that because I want to pull that up. Matter of fact, you know what? Let me do this right now. I don't have that hot link. Let me go get this right now, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'll make sure we answer the questions. So I'm going to reshare the screen. So bear with me a second. You're not seeing what I'm doing right now. Let me pull it up. I'm going to go to the GM website. See if I get the one I want here. Okay, now let me reshare. Let me stop share and reshare this screen. So these links I'm going to send you guys. Okay, let me go back to share screen now. And there we go. Let me share this one.
You're going to be sending those links.
I'll send those out with the video today.
Okay.
Okay. So now this is on a browser, so I should be able to zoom.
That one will be email, huh?
Yeah, that'll come with the email with the video link. Okay. You all should have got the video link from yesterday. Okay, there we go. I'm going to zoom this so you can see it better. So what we did on this vehicle, Alberto, is we went in here. You can do it by VIN, but since we had that page of information, we could just go ahead and put the soft Cal ID, the number on the left, put it in here, tell it to get the CVN, and it would it would come up, it would generate the CVN that should be with that part number. And then what we did is we used that information to compare it to that screen that you saw. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just that you were just saying that the main operating system, I guess the CPU, but that was actually matched to the manufactured one.
That was the only one that had an update.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the only one that had an update. The original ones that came out of the vehicle, and let me stop share a second and go back there because this is what I want to do. I don't want to go away from these because these are excellent questions. Let me go back to share screen here and go to the other one. Bear with me. Let me go to this one and let me answer your question on that one. Let me pull up the one I want. Then I'll put it in the format. Okay, so let's go here. So basically what we did is we went and verified, because here's the catch. You don't know looking at this number if it's right.
Okay.
So I took this number on each one of these and I dropped it into that screen I just showed you, and it generated a CVN that should be with that part number.
Okay.
I could have put in the VIN and gone through a whole nother procedure to do it, but I just put in the part number and it generated the CVN. And every one of these matched up to these existing part numbers. Okay. Now remember, the car's still acting weird.
Okay.
Something got tampered in here because the only thing that got done in the end is he replaced that 025 calibration, this one here. He replaced it with the 1631. Okay. So something was scrambled in there, and through the reprogramming, they could not get it right. The EEPROM was not getting cleared, whatever. So if I take this 127, let's see, let me write that down just to show you. 1271163, and let me get all those in there. So what I do is very simply, this site is free to you. Let me stop share again. That was a lot of jumping around, but just bear with me. So I go back to this site right here. Whoops, no, I don't want that one. I want the GM one. And I go ahead and put in 1271163. That's the part number. Did I miss some number in there? 1163. That looks right.
You need one more one, I think.
I think I dropped one in there. Which one did I drop out? One in the beginning.
3 ones in a no, 3 ones in a row.
3 ones in a row.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see what happens. See if you guys, yeah, there you go. And so I could do it through the VIN, but I don't need to. As long as I have that part number off my scanner, I can go ahead and verify that's what's in the car. So you see it's 13 BC. That's exactly what we have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's how we did it. And again, I'm helping him. I'm going to be honest with you guys. On the job, this is time consuming if you're not used to it. So that's why I've been willing to step in and help these guys doing this, because it's cutting their time. It's giving me information. It's giving me great information to pass on to you guys. But it's a process that once you get this down, and unfortunately, if you don't work on GMs, this is kind of a moot point. You're going to have to cozy up to the parts guy and say, hey, can you give me this part number and tell me if they give you this CVN number with it? He won't know what that number is, but at least if they can give that to you, you're one step better off. Unfortunately, this is what needs to be out there. Every manufacturer, to me, should be obligated to have this information out there now, especially with the modified software situation. But then a lot of vehicles never experience this, and that might be part of the reason they do it. Okay. Did that answer the question on how to look those up, Alberto?
Yes, it did.
Okay, good.
Quick question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do the engineering, they don't get any regulation or some type of, rule they have to follow to?
No, because here's what happened. And I'm going to answer that question honestly. One time I was back at EPA in Ann Arbor with the people that made EVAP equipment. And we were back there talking to EPA and bringing up some issues. And the bottom line here was the people at EPA were hand-tied because they basically told us certain changes they want to implement come down to, they talk to the money crunchers at the manufacturers, and the manufacturers say, can't do that, too expensive. So while they can lay out certain regulations, it's only after they've also consulted with the manufacturers, see what they're willing to do and that's where some of the blockage is. Another example would be when the CARB rules were rewritten for CAN. Mike McCarthy, who was in charge of the program for CARB and did all that, and he was tremendous. And he's the one that said, hey, we need to write OBD2 regulations for techs. And that's why global OBD2 is as good as it is now. He came to myself and other people like myself and said, what do you want in it? And I said, well, I showed him the Chrysler scan tool where they actually give you the min and the max, and you just got to drive between the two. I said, I want that. And I went over to GM and said, I want the thing that says cat monitor enabled and some other things. Well, he got some of those in, but he could never get the Chrysler thing in because you know what the other manufacturers did? They said, no, we can't do that. And that's where it stopped. So you know what I always said about MPG? Some of you guys have heard me say this. MPG, miles per gallon, or GPM, grams per mile, no matter how you move the letters, it comes around, it's still money, politics, and greed. Okay? And some of you have heard me say that before. And I say this honestly to a lot of people. If we were serious about all this, we could have everybody doing the same thing. Pages like this, pages like the Ford stuff would be available for everybody. That engineering page I showed you for the GM that I now have the Audi on through a friend, that should be available for us. A lot of the stuff we go looking for is garbage. And this is stuff that could help us. Okay? Any other questions on that? Good questions.
I was wondering more about, why to get a criteria for a monitor which the driver will never meet. Like for example, GM has for running the catalytic converter monitor being dry for a certain amount of time, which we're gonna say the customer has that one possibility to run that one when you get to a turn signal light. I mean, like it wait some minute there, or the 6,000 RPM you talk about,
Yeah, and I think, and talking to my Honda guy, I think, being honest with you, I think he also, like I believe, somewhere along the line, they're going to get enough of those that there's going to be a reflash for that. That's our opinion. He runs some of he's in the shop, but he does some hotline stuff too. And he and I both agree that there's going to be some kind of reflash for that. Because it's just not normal. But you got to realize that I asked myself many times, how did they get through the certification process? How did that ever happen? But it happens. I don't have the ins and outs of all that, but somehow they're getting through it. That's like that Maserati. Maybe because it was a low volume vehicle, maybe they're not held to the same standard as others. I don't know. I just know that there's no way that the average customer is going to drop it and drive for 10 or 17 minutes and let it sit there. Okay? Because it's at startup. So most people are going to start it up, where to go. So I don't think we'll ever have the answer to that. Okay. Any other questions? Good comments today. That's what I was hoping. And I'm sorry if I missed any chats. It looks like I get them all. Okay. Let's get to the last screen and let's show you what you need to do today. Okay. So today when you're done, 12:30 again, you're going to go back to Canvas. Hopefully you've all found your materials, as I mentioned yesterday. You're You're going to go in and do the handling incomplete monitors quiz. Same as yesterday, 70% or higher for you guys that are seeking bar credit. Some of you took advantage of the 2 tries and went for the higher scores or good scores. Remember, if you do a second attempt, you can see the ones you missed, but also remember, if you get a lower score, it remembers the highest score. Do that by tomorrow morning. Now, there's one other thing we have to do. This is where I always get messed up here, going back to, I want to go back to my,